The morning Sarah Morgan woke up to change. Everything started like every other morning in the past 13 years. Unremarkable, exhausting,
I saw
suffocating in
him.
its
He just
routine
kept hitting
sameness.
her. I
5:30
tried to
a.m.,
help, but
Brooklyn.
he
A
turned
walk-up
towards me with
apartment where the
that same
radiator
look.
clanked through winter nights and the wallpaper peeled in long, sad strips down the hallway. Sarah's alarm buzzed from the cracked phone on her nightstand. She silenced it before the second ring. Muscle memory. She'd been waking at 5:30 for 3 years straight. Her body knew the rhythm even when her mind begged for 5 more minutes. First check. Always the first check. Sarah pushed herself upright, bare feet hitting cold linoleum, and crossed the narrow hallway to her brother's room. The door creaked. She winced. Liam was a light sleeper. But tonight, this morning, he didn't stir. The breathing monitor on his nightstand glowed steady green. In and out, in and out. His small chest rising and falling beneath Batman sheets their father bought him 7 years ago. Back when Sarah was 16 and the world still made sense. Relief flooded through her the way it did every single morning. Green light meant breathing. Breathing meant alive. Alive meant one more day. Sarah stood in the doorway watching her 10-year-old brother sleep. Liam looked peaceful, innocent, his face smooth and unburdened by the blood disorder that kept him tethered to hospital visits and medication schedules, and the constant fear that one morning the light wouldn't be green. She wanted to let him sleep, to give him this one gift of uninterrupted rest. But there were 7 pills he needed to take with breakfast. And if he didn't take them on time, by 3 p.m. his energy would crash, and by dinner he'd be too weak to eat. Second check. Sarah left Liam's door cracked and moved to the next bedroom. Her mother's room. She didn't bother knocking anymore. Kate Morgan wouldn't hear it anyway. The room smelled stale, recycled air, and something chemical, something wrong. Sarah's eyes adjusted to the darkness. Her mother lay sprawled across the unmade bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. An empty glass sat on the nightstand beside 3 orange prescription bottles. Sarah picked up each bottle, turned them in her hands, read the labels she'd memorized years ago. Oxycodone, 30 pills. Refilled 4 days ago. She counted. 26 left. 4 pills in 4 days. That was the prescribed amount. That meant her mother was following the rules, following the plan. It should have made Sarah feel better. It didn't. She set the bottles back down, watched her mother's shallow breathing. Kate's face looked older than 48, older than it should. Lines carved deep around her eyes and mouth, gray streaking through her dark hair. Once her mother had been beautiful. Sarah remembered that version of Kate Morgan, remembered her laughing in the kitchen while their father spun her around to old music on the radio, remembered her baking cookies and braiding Sarah's hair, and reading bedtime stories in voices that made even boring books feel magical. That version died the same night their father did. Sarah pulled the thin blanket over her mother's shoulders. Kate didn't wake, didn't stir. Sarah stood there for 3 long breaths and then left, closing the door softly behind her. The kitchen was worse. Bills scattered across the small table, envelopes marked with red letters. Final notice, past due, urgent. Sarah had stopped opening most of them. She knew what they said. Rent 3 months overdue, electricity about to be shut off. Liam's medical bills stacked so high she couldn't see the top of the pile anymore. $47,000. That's what the last hospital statement said. $47,000 they didn't have and would never have unless Sarah worked every shift available for the next decade. She made coffee in the pot that sputtered and wheezed. While it brewed, she opened the refrigerator. Sparse. Milk with 3 days left before expiration. Eggs, bread, peanut butter, apples that were starting to bruise. She needed to go grocery shopping, but grocery shopping required money, and money required working. And working meant leaving Liam with the neighbor Mrs. Chen, who was kind but 70, and couldn't handle an emergency if Liam's condition flared. The coffee finished. Sarah poured it into a chipped mug, drank it black because they were out of sugar. The bitter taste matched her mood. 6 a.m., time to wake Liam. She returned to his room with gentleness learned from years of practice, sat on the edge of his bed, smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Liam, baby, time to wake up." His eyes fluttered. Green eyes, their father's eyes. Liam blinked up at her, confused for a moment, and then smiled that gap-toothed smile that made every morning worth it. "Is it school day?" Yes, baby, school day. Can I stay home? You know you can't. Liam's face fell, but he didn't argue. He never argued anymore. That worried Sarah more than the complaints ever did. 10-year-olds should argue about going to school, should whine and negotiate and push boundaries. But Liam had learned too young that some things weren't negotiable. His illness wasn't negotiable. Their poverty wasn't negotiable. Their mother's absence wasn't negotiable. Sarah helped him sit up, brought him the 7 pills in a small cup with water. He swallowed them one by one without complaint. She laid out his clothes, watched him dress himself slowly. He moved carefully. Everything hurt when your blood didn't work right. Everything took extra energy. "Where's Mom?" Liam asked while pulling on his socks. "Sleeping." Still. Liam's face did something complicated. Something no 10-year-old should have to feel. Disappointment mixed with acceptance, mixed with a grief he was too young to name. Sarah's heart cracked a little more. It cracked every day. She wondered if there was anything left that wasn't already broken. "I'll make you breakfast," Sarah said. "Eggs okay?" "Eggs are good." She made scrambled eggs with the last 3 eggs in the carton, toast with the last of the peanut butter, an apple sliced thin because Liam's stomach couldn't handle much in the morning. She packed his lunch while he ate, a sandwich, crackers, another apple, a juice box. She wrote a note for the school nurse reminding her about Liam's 3 p.m. medication. She'd written the same note every day for 2 years. The nurse knew. But Sarah wrote it anyway. 7 a.m. Mrs. Chen knocked on the door right on time. Sarah answered. Mrs. Chen smiled with her whole face, wrinkles deepening around kind eyes. "Morning, Sarah. Morning, Liam baby." "Morning, Mrs. Chen. Thank you for watching him before school." No trouble at all. You work hard for your family, I help. That's what neighbors do." Sarah wanted to cry. Instead, she smiled, hugged Liam tight, whispered, "Be good. I love you." "Love you too." She watched them walk down the hallway to Mrs. Chen's apartment. Liam's backpack too big for his small frame. Mrs. Chen's hand gentle on his shoulder. The door closed. Sarah stood alone in her apartment, surrounded by bills and silence, and the weight of responsibility that pressed down on her chest until breathing felt like work. 7:15 a.m. Sarah needed to leave. 2 subway trains to Manhattan, 45 minutes if the trains ran on time, an hour if they didn't. She couldn't be late, couldn't afford to be late. Her job at the Sterling Hall was the only thing keeping them afloat. Barely afloat, but afloat. She dressed in black pants and a white button-down shirt, the uniform. She kept 3 white shirts rotating so there was always a clean one. She pulled her dark hair back into a tight bun, put on minimal makeup. Waitresses at the Sterling Hall were supposed to be invisible, beautiful enough to blend into the elegant atmosphere, but plain enough not to draw attention. It was a careful balance. Sarah had mastered it. Before leaving, she grabbed one item from her dresser drawer, a corkscrew, old, tarnished silver, the handle engraved with the initials R and M, Robert Morgan, her father. He'd given it to her the morning he died. She'd been 10 years old. He was heading out for a late shift, and he pressed the corkscrew into her small hands and said, "Keep this safe, Sarah girl. Someday you'll understand." She didn't understand then. She didn't understand now, but she carried it in her apron pocket every single day. A talisman, a promise, a connection to the man who used to make her feel safe. Sarah left the apartment, locked 3 separate locks, took the stairs because the elevator was broken again, emerged into cold November morning air that bit at her face and hands. Brooklyn stretched around her, concrete and noise and people rushing to places they'd rather not be. The subway platform was crowded. Sarah wedged herself into a corner and stared at nothing while the train rattled through darkness. Around her, people talked on phones and listened to music and read books and existed in their own bubbles of concern. No one looked at her. No one saw her. That was fine. Sarah had spent 3 years perfecting the art of being invisible. It was safer that way. Easier. When people didn't see you, they didn't ask questions, didn't pry into your life, didn't judge your mother's addiction or your brother's illness or your father's death. Invisible meant protected. The train jerked to stops and starts. Passengers flowed on and off. Sarah counted stops in her head. 12 stops. Transfer. 8 more stops. 43 minutes total. She arrived at her station and climbed stairs into Manhattan morning. The city here looked different, cleaner, richer, buildings that reached into the sky like fingers, cars that cost more than Sarah would earn in 5 years, people in suits and heels walking with purpose and confidence. This was where power lived, where money moved, where people like Sarah served people like them. The Sterling Hall sat on the corner of Madison Avenue and 63rd Street. From the outside, it looked understated, elegant, a cream-colored building with subtle gold lettering above the entrance. No flashy signs, no advertisements. If you needed a sign to know about the Sterling Hall, you couldn't afford to eat there. Sarah entered through the back service door. The kitchen was already alive with motion. Chef Laurent barking orders in rapid French, sous chefs moving like dancers through choreographed chaos, the smell of fresh bread and roasting meat, and something rich and butter-soaked, the heat from the ovens, the clang of pots and pans, the organized violence of preparing food for people who expected perfection. Sarah clocked in, 8:27 a.m., 3 minutes early. She changed into her serving vest, black with gold buttons, white gloves that she hated because they made her hands feel trapped. She checked her reflection in the small bathroom mirror. Hair neat, face neutral. Invisible. The front-of-house manager, a thin man named Gregory with silver hair and a permanent expression of mild disappointment, gathered the serving staff for morning briefing. "Today's reservations," Gregory announced, scanning his tablet. "Full house for lunch, completely booked for dinner. VIP table 7 tonight. Mr. Castellano's private party. 8 guests, no interruptions unless signaled. Sarah, you're assigned to table 7. Sarah's stomach tightened. Table 7 was the most important table in the restaurant, the most visible, the most demanding. It meant high tips but high pressure. One mistake and Gregory would reassign her to lesser tables. 2 mistakes and she'd be serving water and bread for weeks. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. "The usual expectations," Gregory continued. "Invisible service. Anticipate needs. No chatter. Mr. Castellano does not like to be disturbed, understood?" Everyone nodded. "Good. Lunch service begins in 20 minutes. Stations." The staff dispersed. Sarah moved to her section, checked the table settings, straightened a fork that was millimeters out of alignment, adjusted the angle of a wine glass. Everything at the Sterling Hall had to be perfect. Everything had a place. Everything had a rule. The dining room itself was breathtaking. Even after 3 years, Sarah still felt a small flutter when she stepped into the space. Cream-colored walls with gold leaf molding that caught the light. Crystal chandeliers hanging from 20-foot ceilings. Each piece of glass cut to throw rainbows across white tablecloths. The tables spaced far enough apart for privacy, but close enough to feel exclusive. Windows overlooking Madison Avenue, where afternoon sun would pour through like liquid gold. This was where Manhattan's elite came to be seen by other elite. Senators and CEOs and celebrities who wanted to eat in peace. Business deals signed over $30 appetizers. Affairs beginning over $100 bottles of wine. Secrets traded between courses. Sarah had witnessed it all. She'd served movie stars and politicians, and people whose names she recognized from news headlines. And they never saw her. Never really looked at her. She was part of the decor. Functional. Forgettable. Lunch service passed in its usual rhythm. Sarah moved through her tables with practiced efficiency, poured water before glasses emptied, cleared plates the moment guests set down their forks, smiled politely when spoken to, and disappeared when ignored. Her feet ached, her shoulders tensed, but her hands stayed steady. That's what mattered. 3 p.m. came and went. Sarah thought about Liam, hoped Mrs. Chen remembered to give him his medication, hoped he wasn't feeling weak, hoped the school nurse checked on him. 5 p.m., dinner set up. Gregory assembled the staff again. "Tonight's service," he said. "Mr. Castellano arrives at 7 sharp, table 7. Sarah, your lead server. Martin, your support. Mr. Castellano is bringing important guests. This is not the night for errors. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir." Sarah's stomach twisted again. Dominic Castellano. Everyone who worked at the Sterling Hall knew his name. He owned the restaurant, owned 3 others in Manhattan, owned half of the Upper East Side if rumors were true. He was the kind of man people whispered about, the kind of man who made other powerful men nervous. Sarah had served him a dozen times. He was always polite, always tipped well, always remembered her name. That last part made her more uncomfortable than anything else. Men like Dominic Castellano shouldn't remember the names of their waitresses. 7 p.m. arrived like a countdown. The dining room filled with guests. Low conversation. The clink of silverware on china. Classical music playing softly from hidden speakers. Everything perfect. Everything controlled. And then Dominic Castellano entered. The room shifted. Sarah felt it even though she was across the dining floor. It was like a pressure change before a storm. Conversations dropped in volume. People glanced toward the entrance and then quickly away. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim slightly, as if the light itself was bowing to his presence. Dominic Castellano was 58 years old, with silver hair combed back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in his eyes. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than Sarah's yearly rent. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. Never had to. Behind him came his guests. Sarah recognized one immediately. Marcus Trent. He'd been to the restaurant before. Always with Dominic. Always laughing too loud. Marcus was younger, maybe 45, with dark hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore expensive clothes, but somehow they looked wrong on him. Like costume instead of identity. The group moved to table 7, Dominic at the head, Marcus to his right, 2 other men Sarah didn't recognize across from them. Business associates. Lawyers, maybe, or accountants. The kind of men who handled other people's money and other people's secrets. Gregory appeared at Sarah's elbow. Table 7 is seated. Begin service. Sarah took a breath, smoothed her vest, picked up a crystal water carafe and walked across the dining room. With each step, she made herself smaller, more invisible. It was a mental trick. Shoulders in, eyes down, presence minimized. By the time she reached table 7, she'd transformed into furniture. "Good evening, gentlemen," Sarah said, voice perfectly neutral. "Welcome to the Sterling Hall." Dominic looked up. His eyes met hers. Recognition flickered across his face. "Sarah Morgan," he said. "How are you this evening?" The fact that he knew her name shouldn't have surprised her. It still did. "Very well, sir. Thank you for asking." "And your brother, Liam, isn't it? How is he managing?" Sarah's hand tightened on the carafe. How did Dominic Castellano know about Liam? "He's well, sir. Thank you." "And your mother, Catherine?" The water nearly spilled. Sarah caught herself. "She's well also, sir." Dominic's eyes stayed on her face a moment longer. He saw more than she wanted him to see. Then he smiled. A small, knowing smile. "Please give her my regards." "Of course, sir." Sarah poured water for each guest. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. Why did Dominic Castellano know her family? Why did he ask about them? What connection could a restaurant owner and reputed crime boss possibly have to a dead security guard's widow and children? She finished pouring and stepped back. "May I bring you something from the bar?" Orders were given. Sarah memorized them without writing anything down. Another skill. Another way to be invisible. Servers who wrote things down drew attention. Servers who remembered everything disappeared into the background. She returned to the bar, placed the drink orders, waited while the bartender prepared them with meticulous care. Around her, the restaurant hummed with Friday night energy. Every table full, every guest expecting perfection. Sarah's feet throbbed. She'd been standing for 9 hours. She had 3 more hours before her shift ended. Then the subway ride home. Then checking on Liam. Then making sure her mother was still breathing. Then collapsing into bed for 6 hours before starting over. This was her life. This was all it would ever be. The drinks were ready. Sarah arranged them on a silver tray and carried them back to table 7. She served each guest without error. Dominic barely glanced at her. He was deep in conversation with Marcus about something that made his expression darken. Sarah was about to retreat when she heard it. Just 2 words, but they stopped her completely. "Warehouse fire." Marcus said them. Casual, like discussing the weather. Sarah's body went rigid, every muscle locked. The tray in her hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. She forced herself to move, stepped back to the server station 15 feet from table 7, close enough to hear if she strained, far enough to maintain invisibility. She picked up a wine glass, polished it slowly, anything to look busy while her ears strained toward the conversation. Marcus's voice carried. He was one of those people who didn't understand the concept of inside voice, or maybe he just didn't care. 13 years, Dom. That investigator of yours should have stayed quiet. The warehouse fire solved more problems than anyone realizes. Sarah's vision tunneled. The wine glass slipped from her hand. She caught it a split second before it hit the floor, set it down carefully on the station counter. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only hear those words on repeat. 13 years, warehouse fire, investigator. Her father died in a warehouse fire 13 years ago. He'd worked security at some facility in Brooklyn. The fire was ruled accidental, faulty wiring. Insurance paid out, case closed. But accidents didn't need to be stayed quiet about. Accidents didn't solve problems. Sarah's hands started to shake. She gripped the counter to steady them, forced herself to breathe, forced herself to listen. Marcus continued, oblivious to the waitress standing 20 feet away whose world was cracking apart. Robert Morgan thought he could play both sides. Feeding you information, taking my money. Should have known he'd become a liability. Robert Morgan. Her father's name, coming out of Marcus Trent's mouth like garbage. Sarah couldn't feel her legs. Couldn't feel anything except the roaring in her ears. She wanted to scream. Wanted to run over to that table and grab Marcus by his expensive collar and demand to know what he meant. What information? What money? What liability? But she couldn't move. Training held her in place. 3 years of making herself invisible kept her frozen at the server station while her father's murderer laughed about his death over cocktails. Dominic's voice cut through the roar, low, warning. We don't discuss ancient history in public, Marcus. Relax, Marcus said. Who's going to hear? The help? He gestured vaguely in Sarah's direction without actually looking at her. To him, she was furniture, background noise, not worth considering. Sarah's shock transformed into something else, something hot and sharp and dangerous. Rage, pure, clean, burning rage. This man killed her father, talked about it like it was nothing, called him a liability, and now sat in the restaurant her father's daughter served, eating food her father's daughter brought him, completely confident that the help wouldn't hear, wouldn't understand, wouldn't matter. She picked up the water carafe again, walked toward table 7 on legs that somehow still worked. Her hands shook, but she kept them hidden behind the carafe. She approached the table. Gentlemen, may I refresh your water? They barely glanced at her. Sarah moved around the table, poured water into each glass with mechanical precision. And as she poured, Marcus kept talking. The daughter works here, you know, Sarah. She pours your wine, clears your plates, and has no idea her father died because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. The water overflowed. Sarah's hand had stopped pouring, but her mind hadn't registered. Water spilled across the white tablecloth, spread in a dark stain. Everyone at the table looked up at her. Careless, Marcus said. His eyes found hers for the first time. Amusement danced in them. Cruelty. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't apologize, could only stare at the man who just admitted to murdering her father while sitting at her table in her restaurant. My apologies, sir, she finally managed. I'll get a cloth. She turned to walk away, but her knees buckled. She caught herself on the back of an empty chair. The room spun. 13 years of wondering how her father died. 13 years of believing it was an accident. 13 years of watching her mother destroy herself with pills, and her brother grow up without a father, and herself work every hour God gave her to keep them afloat. And all along it was this man, this smiling, well-dressed monster, who talked about murder like it was a solved problem. Dominic stood abruptly. Sarah, are you unwell? She looked at him. At Dominic Castellano, the man Marcus called Dom. The man who'd hired her father as an investigator. The man who knew her family's names. The man who'd let her father die. I'm fine, sir. You don't look fine. Perhaps you should take a moment to think. I'm fine, Sarah repeated. She forced herself upright, walked back to the server station on shaking legs. Another server, Martin, appeared beside her. Sarah, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet. Nothing, I'm fine. You're not fine. Let me get Gregory. No, the word came out sharp, hard. I'm fine. I just need a minute. Martin looked uncertain, but nodded. Sarah grabbed a clean cloth and returned to table 7, knelt beside the water stain, began dabbing it with mechanical motions. Don't think, don't feel. Just clean the spill and get through the next 30 seconds and then the 30 seconds after that. Marcus watched her work. She felt his eyes on her back, felt him studying her the way cats study wounded mice. "You're Robert Morgan's daughter, aren't you?" Marcus asked. Sarah kept dabbing. "I don't discuss personal matters during service, sir." "Of course. Your father didn't discuss his personal matters either, not even when the warehouse was burning around him." The cloth stilled in her hand. Sarah looked up slowly, met Marcus's eyes, saw the malice there, the enjoyment. He knew she'd heard, knew she understood, and he didn't care. Because what could a waitress do? What power did she have? Nearby tables were quiet now, other guests sensing something wrong, something off. The music kept playing, but it sounded distant, hollow. Marcus leaned back in his chair, relaxed, confident. "Tell me, Sarah, do you think about him, your father? Do you wonder what his last moments were like, the smoke filling his lungs, the heat?" Sarah's jaw clenched. She could feel her teeth grinding together. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear the way she'd learned to do. But something else rose up inside her, something she'd buried for 13 years under grief and responsibility and the desperate need to survive. Fury. "He should have taken the money I offered," Marcus continued. "Should have disappeared quietly. But no, he had to be a hero. And heroes." He picked up his wine glass, held it suspended over the tablecloth, over the stain Sarah was cleaning. "Heroes burn." He tipped the glass. Red wine poured out in a slow stream, splashed across the white fabric, across Sarah's hands, staining everything crimson. Gasps erupted around the room. Other guests saw, other servers saw. Gregory was already moving toward the table. Chef Laurent appeared in the kitchen doorway. Marcus set down his empty glass. "Oops." Sarah stared at her wine-stained hands, at the spreading red across white, at this man who'd murdered her father and now humiliated his daughter for entertainment. "Clean that up, sweetheart," Marcus said. "And do be more careful. Your father had careless hands too. Look where that got him." Something inside Sarah snapped. Some final thread holding her together just severed cleanly. She stood up, looked Marcus Trent directly in his smiling face, and she said the words that would change everything. "My father was a good man." The room went completely silent. Even the music seemed to stop. Sarah heard her own heartbeat, heard her own breathing, heard the weight of every word about to come out of her mouth. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "My father," Sarah repeated louder now, "was a good man." "Your father was a thief and a rat. You killed him." The words hung in the air like the smoke that filled the warehouse where Robert Morgan died. People at nearby tables turned to stare. Silverware stopped moving. Conversations ceased. Everyone watched the waitress and the man at table 7. Marcus's smile widened. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "You just confessed. Everyone heard you." Marcus looked around the dining room, at the frozen guests, at the staff standing still as statues, at Dominic Castellano, who sat with an expression like carved stone. "I said your father died in a fire. That's public record. Accidental death. Insurance paid. Where's the crime? You said he should have stayed quiet, that he became a liability. Those aren't words you use about accidents." "Aren't they? I suppose that's a matter of interpretation." "You killed my father." Sarah's voice was steady now, clear. She felt something like power flowing through her veins. 13 years of silence breaking open. "You murdered him, and you've been walking free while my family fell apart, while my mother destroyed herself trying to forget what she saw, while my brother grew up without a father, while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to hold everyone together. You did that. You." Marcus stood slowly. He was taller than Sarah by 6 inches, broader, stronger. But Sarah didn't step back, didn't lower her eyes, didn't disappear. "You should be careful, little Sarah, making accusations about things you don't understand. People who ask too many questions tend to have accidents, just like your father." "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice." Dominic stood as well. His voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Marcus, enough. She's accusing me of murder, Dom, in your restaurant, in front of witnesses. And you're threatening a member of my staff, also in front of witnesses." Marcus's jaw tightened. For the first time, his smile faltered. "She heard things she shouldn't have. That's a security problem." "The only security problem I see is you discussing business in a public restaurant." They stared at each other, some silent battle of wills happening in the space between them. Sarah stood frozen. Part of her brain was screaming that she'd just committed professional suicide. The other part didn't care. Couldn't care. Her father's murder wasn't something she could stay quiet about. Not anymore. A man stood up from a corner table. Sarah hadn't noticed him before, mid-30s, brown hair, wearing a simple dark suit. He walked toward table 7 with purpose. "That's enough," the man said. Marcus turned. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who heard your confession." The man pulled out his phone, pressed a button. Marcus's voice played from the speaker, clear and damning. "That investigator of yours should have stayed quiet. The warehouse fire solved more problems than anyone realizes." Silence, heavy and complete. The man pressed another button. "I've been recording this entire conversation, and I've already sent it to 3 different locations. Your confession is preserved, Mr. Trent." Marcus's face went white, then red, then purple. "You recorded me? That's illegal. Actually, in New York State, only one party needs to consent to a recording." "I consented." "You're done. Dom, do something." But Dominic didn't move. He looked at Marcus like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. Or maybe he'd always seen him and was just tired of pretending. Marcus's hand moved toward his jacket. Fast, instinctive. The man from the corner table saw it, shouted, "Gun!" Everything happened at once. The man lunged toward Sarah. Tables overturned. Guests screamed. Marcus pulled a pistol from inside his jacket. Gregory was shouting. Chef Laurent was shouting. Everyone was moving and screaming, and the world was chaos. The gun fired. The sound was impossibly loud. Louder than anything Sarah had ever heard. It echoed off the high ceilings and crystal chandeliers and cream-colored walls. Someone was screaming. Maybe Sarah. Maybe everyone. Sarah felt impact. Felt the man from the corner table slam into her. Felt them both hit the floor hard. Her shoulder exploded in white-hot pain. Hot liquid spread across her chest. Blood. Her blood. She'd been shot. The world tilted sideways. Sound became muffled. Distant. Through the chaos, she heard voices shouting commands. Heard Gregory yelling about calling the police. Heard Dominic's voice cold and furious, demanding Marcus be restrained. Hands pressed against Sarah's shoulder. The man from the corner table. His face swam above hers. He was saying something, but she couldn't hear over the roaring in her ears. More faces appeared. Concerned strangers. Restaurant staff. And through them all, Sarah saw her mother, Kate Morgan, standing in the doorway of the Sterling Hall, looking more awake and alert than she'd been in 13 years. How did she get here? Why was she here? And then Marcus's voice cut through everything, shouting as security held him. "She knows! The mother knows everything! She was there!" Kate's face crumbled. Sarah tried to reach for her, but her arm wouldn't work. The pain in her shoulder was spreading, or maybe she was disappearing into it. The edges of her vision darkened. The faces above her started to blur. The man from the corner table pressed harder on her wound. "Stay with me, Sarah. Stay with me. Help is coming. Just stay awake." Sarah tried. She really tried. But the darkness was so heavy, so complete. It pulled her down like water, like smoke, like the fire that took her father 13 years ago. Her last thought before unconsciousness took her was that she'd finally done something. Finally stood up. Finally made herself visible. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The world went black. Somewhere sirens wailed. Somewhere her mother was crying. Somewhere her little brother was waiting for her to come home. But Sarah Morgan, the invisible waitress from Brooklyn, couldn't hear any of it anymore. She'd made her choice. She'd spoken her truth. And now there was only darkness and pain and the fading echo of a gunshot that had shattered everything into 1,000 crystal pieces. Sarah woke to whiteness. Bright, sterile, burning whiteness that hurt her eyes even through closed lids. She tried to open them, managed slits. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Antiseptic smell filled her nose, the taste of copper in her mouth. Everything hurt, but especially her shoulder. Fire lived there, hot and pulsing and wrong. Hospital. She was in a hospital. Memory came back in fragments. The restaurant, Marcus Trent, the confession. The wine spilled across white tablecloth like blood. Her standing up, speaking truth. The gun, the explosion of sound, impact, darkness. Sarah tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her shoulder and she gasped. A hand touched her arm. Gentle, familiar. "Don't move, baby, you're okay." you're safe." That voice. Sarah knew that voice. She forced her eyes fully open and turned her head. Her mother sat in a chair beside the hospital bed. Kate Morgan. But not the Kate that Sarah knew. Not the glazed, distant, pill-hazed woman who'd haunted their apartment for 13 years. This Kate had clear eyes, alert eyes, focused eyes fixed on Sarah's face with an intensity that made Sarah's chest tighten. "Mom, I'm here." "What happened? How are you here?" Kate's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Elias called me. The man who tackled you. He found my number in your phone, told me you'd been shot. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you too." Sarah tried to process this. Her mother. Here. Awake. Sober. Crying real tears instead of the numb nothing she'd shown for years. Sarah reached out with her good arm, touched her mother's hand. Kate grabbed it like a lifeline. "How bad?" Sarah asked. "The bullet grazed your shoulder. Another inch to the left and it would have hit your subclavian artery. You would have bled out in minutes. The doctor said you were lucky." Lucky. Sarah didn't feel lucky. She felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Like her body was made of broken glass. Like 13 years of grief had exploded out of her all at once and left nothing but wreckage behind. "Liam?" Sarah tried to sit up again, failed again. "Where's Liam? Is he okay?" "He's with Mrs. Chen. He doesn't know what happened. I told her to tell him you're working a double shift. He's safe, Sarah. I promise." Sarah sagged back against the pillows. Safe. That word felt fragile, temporary. Marcus Trent was still out there, still free, still dangerous. "Mom," Sarah's voice came out hoarse, raw. "Marcus said something. At the restaurant. He said you know everything. He said you were there." Kate went very still. Her hand tightened on Sarah's. The clear eyes filled with something complicated. Guilt, fear, pain. And underneath it all, relief. Like she'd been waiting 13 years for someone to finally ask. "I was there," Kate whispered. "The night your father died. I saw everything." The hospital room felt too small suddenly. Too bright. Too real. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. She'd spent 13 years believing her father died in an accident. 3 hours ago, she'd learned it was murder. And now her mother was about to tell her she'd witnessed it. How much more could one heart hold before it just stopped beating? "Tell me," Sarah said. "Tell me everything." Kate pulled her hand away, stood, walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. 6 floors below, New York City moved through its night. Cars and people and life continuing like the world hadn't just shattered. Kate pressed her forehead against the glass. When she spoke, her voice was distant, hollow, the voice of someone recounting a nightmare. "Your father called me that night, October 17th, 13 years ago. It was late, almost midnight. He told me to pick him up from a warehouse in Brooklyn. Said he had something important to deliver to Dominic Castellano. Said it was the last piece. After this, everything would be over and we'd be safe. He promised we'd be safe." Kate's breath fogged the window. She drew a shape in it, a heart maybe, or just nothing. "I arrived early, 11:50. Your father said midnight, but I always ran early, anxious habit. I saw Marcus's car already in the lot. Your father told me once that if I ever saw Marcus's car when I came to pick him up, I should leave immediately. Drive away, don't look back. But I didn't. I was worried. I went inside." Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only listen as her mother described the night that destroyed their family. The warehouse was dark, old, smelled like motor oil and rust. I heard voices, shouting. I hid behind some shipping crates, watched through the gaps. Your father was there with a box, documents, evidence. Marcus was there with 2 other men. They were arguing. Kate turned from the window, looked at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much. That would never unsee it. "Marcus said your father betrayed him. Said Robert was feeding information to Dominic while taking Marcus's money. Your father said he was doing what was right, that Marcus was a criminal and criminals deserve prison." Marcus laughed. He said right and wrong don't matter. Only power matters. Only staying ahead matters. A tear slid down Kate's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "Your father begged. I'd never heard him beg for anything, but he begged Marcus. Said he had a wife, a daughter, a family. 'Please don't do this,' Marcus said, 'then you shouldn't have been a rat.'" Kate's voice broke completely. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Sarah wanted to go to her, wanted to hold her. But her body wouldn't cooperate, wouldn't move, could only lie there while her mother relived the worst moment of both their lives. Marcus shot him, twice, in the chest. Your father fell. He was still alive, still breathing, gasping. Marcus's men poured gasoline everywhere, set it on fire. And then Marcus walked over to where your father lay bleeding and he shot him again in the head to finish it. Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Some final barrier between the girl she'd been and the woman this moment was making her. Her father hadn't died quickly, hadn't died in an explosion or smoke inhalation. He'd been executed, shot 3 times while her mother watched. I stayed hidden until they left, Kate continued. I wanted to run to him, wanted to try to save him. But the fire spread so fast. The heat was unbearable. I tried, I swear I tried, but I couldn't reach him. The flames were too high, so I ran, got in my car, drove home, showered, scrubbed the smoke smell off my skin, took pills to stop shaking, and I haven't stopped taking them since. Kate walked back to Sarah's bedside, knelt down so they were eye level. The next day Marcus came to our apartment. He brought flowers, held me while I cried, and he whispered in my ear that it would be such a tragedy if something happened to you too. You were only 10 years old, so vulnerable, so easy to hurt. He told me if I ever spoke about what I saw, you'd disappear, just like Robert. So I stayed quiet, and I've been drowning myself trying to forget. Sarah reached out with her good arm, pulled her mother close. Kate collapsed against the hospital bed and sobbed, real sobs. Not the quiet, pill-muted crying Sarah had heard through bedroom walls for years. This was raw, honest, the grief of 13 years finally allowed to breathe. I'm so sorry, Kate whispered against Sarah's shoulder. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect him. Couldn't protect you. Couldn't be the mother you needed. You saved me, Sarah said. Her own tears fell hot and fast. You saved me and Liam. That's what Dad would have wanted. That's what matters. They held each other, mother and daughter. 2 people broken by the same violence. 2 people trying to find their way back to something like whole. The door opened. Both women looked up. A man stood in the doorway, mid-30s, brown hair, careful eyes. He wore jeans and a dark jacket. His hands were bandaged. He looked exhausted, but alert. This was the man from the restaurant, the one who'd tackled Sarah, the one who'd recorded Marcus's confession. Sarah Morgan, he said. I'm glad you're awake. May I come in? Sarah nodded. The man entered, pulled a second chair beside Kate's, sat down with the weariness of someone who'd been standing for hours. My name is Elias Hart, he said. I'm now sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. You saved my life. You saved your own life. I just made sure the bullet didn't kill you. He showed his bandaged hands. Burn these, pulling you away from the chaos. Small price. Sarah studied him. Something about his face was familiar. Something in the set of his jaw or the shape of his eyes. Do I know you? No, but you knew my father, Jack Hart. He worked with your father 13 years ago. The room went silent. Kate straightened in her chair. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Your father worked with mine? They were partners, Elias said. Robert Morgan and Jack Hart. Your father was investigating Marcus Trent on behalf of Dominic Castellano. My father was helping him, gathering evidence, documenting crimes. They planned to expose Marcus together, but the night of the warehouse fire, my father disappeared. Disappeared? Elias's jaw tightened. I spent years looking for him. Hired investigators, filed missing person reports, followed every lead. 3 years ago I found him, buried in a construction site in New Jersey. He'd been executed. 2 shots to the back of the head, Marcus Trent's signature. Sarah felt sick. Another family destroyed, another father murdered, another child left with questions and grief and rage. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be sorry. Get angry. Anger is what's going to get us justice. Elias pulled out his phone. I've been eating at the Sterling Hall twice a week for 6 months, waiting for Marcus to slip up, waiting for him to say something incriminating in public. Tonight he finally did, and I recorded every word. He pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the hospital room, that smooth, confident voice confessing to murder like discussing a business transaction. Sarah listened to her own voice challenging him, heard the moment she stood up, the moment she made herself visible, the moment everything changed. This recording is admissible in court, Elias said. Combined with your mother's testimony, we have enough to prosecute Marcus Trent for your father's murder. Kate shook her head violently. No, absolutely not. If I testify, Marcus will kill Sarah. He'll kill Liam. He threatened them once. He'll do it again. He already tried to kill Sarah, tonight, in a room full of witnesses. He's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. This is our chance. Our chance? Kate's voice rose. This is my daughter's life, my son's life. I won't sacrifice them for justice. Mom, Sarah said quietly, we don't have a choice anymore. Marcus knows I heard him, knows I challenged him. He's not going to let that go. The only way we're safe is if he's in prison. Kate looked between Sarah and Elias, her clear eyes filling with the fear that had driven her to pills for 13 years. But underneath the fear, something else, something harder, determination maybe, or just the understanding that running was over. What do we need to do? Kate asked. Elias leaned forward. We need leverage. The recording helps, but Marcus has expensive lawyers. They'll argue it's hearsay, taken out of context. We need the physical evidence your father gathered, the ledgers, the photographs, the documentation he died trying to protect. It burned, Kate said. Marcus set the fire to destroy it. Maybe not all of it. Elias looked at Sarah. Before your father died, he told Dominic Castellano something. He said if anything happened to him, he'd hidden backup copies somewhere only Sarah would think to look. Those were his exact words. Sarah's mind raced. Somewhere only she would think to look. Where would her father hide something meant only for her? She'd been 10 years old. Her world had been small. School, home, the library, her room. And then she remembered. The corkscrew. The old silver corkscrew her father gave her the morning he died. Keep this safe, Sarah girl. Someday you'll understand. I know where it is, Sarah said. Or I know what it is. My father's corkscrew. He gave it to me the day he died. I've carried it in my apron pocket every day for 3 years. Elias's eyes lit up. Where is it now? Sarah's stomach dropped. Yeah, my apartment, in my dresser drawer. We need to get it, tonight. Why tonight? Because Marcus will be looking for it, if he hasn't already found it. As if summoned by speaking his name, Elias's phone rang. He answered, listened. His face went dark. He thanked whoever was on the other end and hung up. That was Dominic's security team, Elias said. Marcus's men broke into your apartment an hour ago, ransacked the place. They're gone now, but they tore it apart looking for something. Sarah's heart plummeted. The corkscrew. It was gone. Their only evidence, their only leverage, gone. But then she remembered. She'd moved it last month when she was reorganizing. She'd been worried about her mother going through drawers looking for anything to sell for pill money. Sarah had taken the corkscrew and hidden it somewhere safer, somewhere Kate would never look, because Kate avoided that place like it held ghosts. It's not in my apartment, Sarah said. I moved it to Mercy General Hospital, in Liam's locker. Elias stood immediately. Then we need to go there, now, before Marcus figures out where you hid it. I can't leave. I'm connected to an IV. The doctor said I need to stay for observation. The doctor also isn't trying to kill you. Marcus Trent is. Elias started unhooking Sarah's IV with surprising competence. I was an EMT before I became a cop. Then I was a cop before I became whatever I am now. I know how to disconnect medical equipment without killing you. Sarah looked at her mother. Kate stood, straightened her shoulders. For the first time in 13 years, she looked solid, present, like the woman she'd been before pills and trauma had hollowed her out. I'll help you get dressed, Kate said. We're finishing this, together. 20 minutes later, they were in Elias's car, a dark sedan that smelled like coffee and leather. Sarah sat in the back with her arm in a makeshift sling, Kate in the passenger seat. Elias drove with one hand, the other resting near a gun holstered at his hip. The streets of Manhattan passed outside the windows. Late night, early morning, the hour when the city finally exhaled. Mercy General Hospital rose ahead of them, 10 stories of concrete and glass and fluorescent light. Sarah had spent so much time here over the past 3 years. Waiting rooms, hallways, Liam's various treatments and appointments. She knew the layout better than her own apartment, knew which nurses were kind, which doctors listened, which parking spots were easiest to access. The pediatric wing was on the 4th floor. That's where patient lockers were. small metal boxes where families could store overnight supplies for sick children. Liam had locker 247. Sarah's hands shook as Elias parked in the garage. "We go in through the employee entrance," Elias said. "Less security, less cameras. We get the corkscrew and get out. 5 minutes maximum." "And if Marcus is already there?" Kate asked. "Then we call the police and leave immediately. No heroics. We're not trying to fight. We're trying to survive." They entered through a side door Elias somehow knew about, moved through maintenance corridors that smelled like bleach and floor wax. Sarah's shoulder throbbed with each step. The pain medication was wearing off. Everything hurt. But she pushed forward. Had to. The corkscrew was proof. Proof her father existed. Proof he'd fought for something. Proof his death mattered. The pediatric wing was quieter at night, dimmer, parents sleeping in chairs beside their children's beds, nurses moving silently between rooms. The television in the family waiting area played infomercials to an empty room. Sarah led them to the locker room, a long, narrow space lined with metal boxes, each numbered, each holding someone's small, desperate hope. Sarah found locker 247, used the key she kept on her keychain. The locker opened with a soft click. Inside, she saw Liam's spare clothes, his favorite book, a small stuffed elephant, and underneath it all, wrapped in a cloth, the corkscrew. Sarah lifted it out. The weight of it felt heavier than it should, like it held more than just memories, like it held truth. She examined it closely for the first time in years. The silver was tarnished, the handle engraved with R and M, Robert Morgan, her father's initials. But as she turned it over, she noticed something. The bottom of the handle. It wasn't solid. There was a seam, a nearly invisible line around the base. Sarah twisted it, the bottom unscrewed. Inside the hollow handle sat a small USB drive wrapped in waterproof plastic. "Oh my God," Kate whispered. Sarah pulled out the drive, held it up to the dim light. This was it. This was what her father died protecting, what Marcus killed for, what Dominic needed. Everything compressed into something smaller than her thumb. "We need to leave," Elias said, "right now." But it was already too late. Sarah heard it in his voice before she saw it. Footsteps, multiple pairs, coming down the corridor toward the locker room. The door opened. Marcus Trent stepped inside, followed by 3 men in dark clothes. He looked different than at the restaurant, less polished, more dangerous. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt untucked, his eyes wild with something between rage and desperation. "Sarah Morgan," Marcus said, "you're more resourceful than your father, but just as stupid." Elias moved in front of Sarah and Kate. His hand went to his gun. Marcus's men already had theirs drawn. 4 guns pointed at 3 unarmed people in a hospital locker room. The math didn't work in their favor. "Give me the drive," Marcus said. "So you can destroy it?" "No." Marcus walked forward slowly, casually, like he had all the time in the world. "You think you're brave, standing up to me, exposing me, but you're not brave. You're desperate, and desperate people make fatal mistakes. The only mistake here is yours. You confessed in a room full of witnesses. You shot at me in a public restaurant. You're already finished." "Am I?" "Because from where I'm standing, I have 4 guns and you have nothing. I'll take the drive. I'll erase it. I'll make sure you and your family have an unfortunate accident. Gas leak, maybe. Carbon monoxide. Very tragic. And no one will ever know what happened here." Sarah's mind raced. She needed leverage, needed something to stop Marcus from just killing them right now. And then she remembered. Elias had recorded Marcus at the restaurant, so why not record him now? Her phone was in her pocket. She'd grabbed it from the hospital room. If she could start a voice recording without Marcus noticing, if she could get him talking again, confessing again, creating more evidence, more proof. Sarah's good hand slipped into her pocket, found her phone, felt for the voice record button, pressed it blind, hoped it worked, hoped the audio would be clear enough, hoped they'd live long enough for it to matter. "Tell me something, Marcus," Sarah said. "Why did you come to my father's funeral? Why did you bring flowers? Why pretend to care?" Marcus's face did something complicated. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "You want to know why?" "I want to understand. You murdered my father, but you acted like you mourned him. Why?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost human. "Because I liked your father, Sarah. Robert Morgan was a good man, honorable, decent. Everything I'm not. and killing him was the hardest thing I've ever done. But you did it anyway. I had no choice. He was in my way. He was going to expose me, ruin everything I'd built. In my world, obstacles get removed, even the ones you respect. So you have no regrets. I didn't say that. I have many regrets. But murdering your father isn't one of them. It was necessary, just like this is necessary. He raised his gun, pointed it at Sarah's head. Kate screamed. Elias moved, but Marcus's men were faster. They grabbed Elias, forced him to his knees, pressed guns to the back of his head. "Give me the drive or I kill your mother," Marcus said. "You have 3 seconds. 1. Sarah's hand tightened on the USB. This was all they had, all her father died for. But her mother was right there, right in Marcus's line of fire. 2. Kate's face was pale, terrified. But when Sarah met her eyes, Kate shook her head. A small, almost invisible movement. "Don't give it to him, don't let him win." 3. "Wait," Sarah said. "You can have it, just please don't hurt her." She held out the USB drive. Marcus smiled, victorious, cruel. He reached for it. The hospital alarm erupted, deafening, piercing. Red lights flashed in the corridor. Over the intercom, a calm voice announced security alert on the 4th floor. Elias must have triggered it somehow, some panic button or silent alarm. Marcus's men turned toward the sound. Distracted for just a second, Elias used that second. He twisted, drove his elbow into one man's stomach, grabbed the gun, fired twice. Both men dropped. The locker room exploded into chaos. Kate grabbed Sarah and pulled her down behind the lockers. Gunfire erupted, bullets punching through metal, ricocheting off walls. The sound was impossibly loud in the small space. Elias was shouting something. Marcus was returning fire. Hospital security was coming. Sarah pressed the USB drive into her mother's hand. "Keep it safe," Sarah said. "No matter what happens. Keep it safe." Kate nodded, tears streaming down her face. Sarah looked around the edge of the locker, saw Marcus near the door, saw Elias pinned down behind an overturned bench, saw one of Marcus's men on the ground bleeding, another trying to flank Elias. And then she saw the fire alarm on the wall beside her. Without thinking, without planning, Sarah reached up and pulled it. Water exploded from the ceiling sprinklers, cold, heavy, drenching everything in seconds. The gunfire paused. Everyone startled by the sudden deluge. Sarah used that pause. She grabbed a metal locker door that had been shot loose, held it like a shield, ran toward the exit. Kate was right behind her. Elias saw them moving, laid down covering fire. Marcus tried to follow, but the hallway was filling with staff and security and chaos. He couldn't shoot. Not here. Not now. Not with this many witnesses. Sarah burst into the corridor. Nurses were evacuating patients, families rushing toward exits, alarms blaring, water pouring. Everything was confusion and noise and movement. Sarah kept running, Kate beside her. Elias caught up, grabbed Sarah's good arm. "This way, emergency stairs." They ran down 4 flights of stairs, Sarah's shoulders screaming with every jarring step. Out a side exit into cold night air, into the parking garage, into Elias's car. He started the engine. Tires squealed. They were moving. Away from the hospital. Away from Marcus. Away from death. Sarah looked back through the rear window. Saw Marcus emerge from the hospital. Saw him watching them escape. Saw him pull out his phone. Making a call, planning something. This wasn't over. Not even close. "Did you get it?" Elias asked. "The USB drive?" Sarah looked at her mother. Kate pulled the drive from her pocket, held it up. Safe, whole, covered in water but intact. "We got it," Sarah said. Elias nodded, drove faster. "Then we go to Dominic. Tonight. He has resources, protection. He can keep you safe while we figure out what's on that drive." Kate leaned back in her seat, closed her eyes. When does this end? When do we get to stop running? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. This didn't end until Marcus was in prison or in the ground, and he'd just proven he was willing to kill them in a hospital full of witnesses. Desperate men are the most dangerous men, and Marcus Trent was running out of options. Sarah held the USB drive in her palm, this small piece of plastic and metal and data. Her father had died protecting this. Jack Hart had died protecting this. Tony, whoever he was, had died protecting this tonight. How many more deaths before the truth finally won? She thought about her father, about the man who'd made her scrambled eggs and taught her to read and given her a corkscrew with a secret inside. He'd known he might die, known the risk, but he'd done it anyway. Because some things matter more than safety. Some things are worth dying for. Justice, truth, family. Those were the things Robert Morgan believed in. Those were the things he'd tried to protect. And now Sarah held that protection in her hand. Held 13 years of silence compressed into circuits and code. The car sped through empty streets toward whatever came next. Sarah's shoulder throbbed. Her mother's hands shook. Elias's jaw was set in grim determination. They were 3 broken people carrying the weight of 2 dead men's dreams. 3 people against an empire of corruption and violence and money. The odds weren't good, but they had the truth. And sometimes, if you're desperate enough and brave enough and angry enough, truth is the only weapon you need. Dawn was breaking over Manhattan, pink and gold light touching the tops of skyscrapers. A new day, a new chance. A new battle in a war that started 13 years ago and was only now finally coming to its reckoning. Sarah closed her eyes, felt the weight of the USB drive, felt her mother's presence beside her, felt the pain in her shoulder that reminded her she was alive. Still here, still fighting. Her father would be proud. She hoped he was watching. Hoped he knew his daughter had inherited his stubborn refusal to stay quiet. His belief that right matters more than easy. His willingness to fight even when fighting seemed impossible. The car turned a corner, headed toward Dominic Castellano's penthouse, toward answers, toward protection, toward whatever came next in the story written in blood and fire and a daughter's unbreakable will. Marcus Trent had made a mistake 13 years ago. He'd left a witness, Kate Morgan, and he'd left a daughter, Sarah Morgan. And now those 2 women were going to finish what Robert Morgan started. The warehouse fire had burned away evidence, but it hadn't burned away memory. It hadn't burned away love. It hadn't burned away the stubborn Morgan family trait of never knowing when to quit. Sarah opened her eyes, looked at the USB drive in her palm, whispered words only her father could hear. "I'm finishing this, Dad, I promise. For you, for Mom, for Liam, for everyone Marcus destroyed, I'm finishing this." And somewhere, in whatever place good men go when they die fighting for what's right, Robert Morgan smiled. Dominic Castellano's safe house sat in Brooklyn Heights, a brownstone that looked like every other brownstone on the tree-lined street. Quiet, respectable, the kind of place where neighbors nodded politely and minded their own business, which was exactly why Dominic owned it. The sun was rising when Elias pulled the car into the narrow alley behind the building. Pink light touched the brick walls. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. The city was waking up to a Saturday morning that would feel normal for everyone except the 3 people climbing out of a sedan with a USB drive that contained evidence of murder. Sarah's shoulder had stopped bleeding, but pain radiated down her arm with every movement. Kate looked hollow, exhausted, like she'd aged a decade overnight. Elias moved with the careful alertness of someone who knew danger wasn't over, just paused. The back door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the frame, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing tactical pants and a shoulder holster. Her eyes scanned the alley before settling on Elias. "You're late," she said. "We had big complications," Elias replied. The woman stepped aside. Let them enter. "Dominic's waiting, 4th floor." They climbed stairs that creaked under their weight. The safe house interior was sparse, functional. No art on the walls, no personal touches, just furniture and rooms and the feeling of temporary existence. Sarah counted 17 stairs to the 2nd floor, 19 to the 3rd, 21 to the 4th. Her legs burned, her shoulders screamed, but she kept climbing. The 4th floor was different. Open space, exposed brick, high ceilings with industrial lighting. Computer equipment lined one wall. 3 monitors, keyboards, technical gear Sarah couldn't name. And in the center of the room, sitting in a leather chair like a king on a throne, Dominic Castellano. He looked older in morning light, tired. The silver hair seemed whiter, the lines around his eyes deeper. But his gaze was sharp when it found Sarah. "Sarah Morgan," Dominic said. "You're alive, I'm glad." "Are you?" Sarah's voice came out harder than she intended. "Because my father worked for you and died for you and you've done nothing about it for 13 years. Dominic's expression didn't change. I've done everything I could, which wasn't enough. I accept that responsibility. Acceptance doesn't bring him back. No, but justice might honor his memory. Do you have what Robert hid? Sarah pulled the USB drive from her pocket, held it up. Such a small thing to carry so much weight. Dominic gestured to the man sitting at the computers. Young, maybe 25, wire-rimmed glasses, focused intensity. This is Alex, Dominic said. He's the best digital forensic analyst in New York. He'll extract everything on that drive. Sarah hesitated. Giving up the drive felt like giving up the last piece of her father, the last connection to his final mission. But she'd carried it this far. Time to see what Robert Morgan died protecting. She handed the drive to Alex. He inserted it into one of the computers. Fingers flew across the keyboard. Code scrolled down the screen. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by clicking keys and the hum of expensive equipment. It's encrypted, Alex said. Military grade. Your father was serious about protecting this. Can you break it? Elias asked. Already done. Password was embedded in the drive's metadata. Clever. He hid the key in plain sight. More typing. More screens opening. Okay, we're in. The main monitor filled with folders. Dozens of them. Each labeled with dates spanning 6 months. October through March. 13 years ago. The last 6 months of Robert Morgan's life. What's in them? Sarah whispered. Alex opened the first folder. Spreadsheets appeared, columns of numbers, dates, names, transactions moving money through accounts in patterns designed to hide their origin. Financial records, Alex said. Looks like Marcus Trent was skimming from Dominic's operations, moving cash to offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Panama. We're talking millions. How much? Dominic's voice was ice. Alex tallied numbers. $47 million over 12 years? The room went silent. Dominic's jaw tightened. Sarah could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. 47 million. Stolen by someone he'd trusted. Someone who sat across from him at dinner and smiled and planned his murder. What else? Dominic said. Alex opened more folders. Photographs appeared. Marcus meeting with men Sarah didn't recognize. Handshakes in parking garages. Envelopes exchanged in restaurants. Conversations in cars with telephoto lenses capturing every detail. Your father documented everything, Alex said. Marcus was building alliances with other families, planning a coup. He wanted to take over your entire organization, Mr. Castellano. Show me the audio files. Alex clicked. Robert Morgan's voice filled the room. Sarah's breath caught. 13 years. 13 years since she'd heard her father's voice. It sounded exactly like she remembered. Warm. Steady. The voice that read her bedtime stories and helped with homework and promised everything would be okay. But this wasn't the father she remembered. This Robert Morgan spoke in careful, measured tones, documenting crimes with the precision of someone who knew his words might be the only evidence that survived him. March 14th, met with Marcus at the Brooklyn warehouse. He admitted to skimming casino earnings, said Dominic was getting old, getting soft, said it was time for new leadership, asked if I wanted to be part of his new organization. I said yes to maintain cover. Another file. March 20th, Marcus showed me his offshore accounts, bragged about how much he'd stolen, said Dominic would never suspect his own head of security. I have the account numbers, I have the passwords, enough to trace every dollar. More files, more recordings. Robert's voice documenting 6 months of betrayal, 6 months of gathering evidence that would destroy Marcus Trent and save Dominic Castellano's empire. And then the final audio file, dated October 17th, the night Robert died. This is my last entry. Tonight I deliver everything to Dominic. Marcus is getting suspicious. I think he knows. Kate is picking me up at midnight. If you're listening to this and I'm not around to explain it, it means something went wrong. It means I didn't make it. Tell Sarah I loved her. Tell her I did this to make the world safer for her. Tell her that truth matters more than fear, and tell Dominic Castellano that I kept my word. I got him the evidence. Now he needs to keep his word and protect my family. The audio ended. Sarah felt tears on her face. Didn't remember starting to cry. Kate's hand found hers, squeezed tight. There's one more file, Alex said quietly. Video. Play it, Dominic ordered. Alex hesitated, looked at Sarah. You might not want to see this. Play it, Sarah repeated. The screen went black, then grainy security footage appeared. Timestamp in the corner, October 17th, 11:47 p.m. Warehouse interior, stacks of shipping crates, concrete floor, poor lighting. Robert Morgan entered a frame carrying a document box. He looked young, 35, strong, alive. Sarah's heart broke watching him move across the screen, watching the last moments of his life play out in silent black and white. 3 men emerged from the shadows. Marcus Trent in the center. Even 13 years younger, Sarah recognized him. The arrogant posture, the cruel smile. Marcus said something. The camera had no audio, but Sarah could read his body language. Aggressive, threatening. Robert backed away, hands raised, pleading. Marcus pulled a gun. Robert dropped to his knees, still talking, still trying. The box fell from his hands. Documents scattered. Marcus shot him. Once, twice. Robert fell. His body jerked with impact, collapsed onto the concrete, but he was still moving, still alive. Marcus's men poured gasoline from red containers. The chemical spread across the floor in dark pools. They set it on fire. Flames erupted, bright enough to wash out the camera. And through the fire, Marcus walked to where Robert lay bleeding, aimed his gun, fired again. The screen went white with flames, then black as the camera died. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only see her father's last moments playing on repeat in her mind. Marcus had executed him, shot him while he begged, burned him while he bled, killed him with the same casual cruelty someone might use to exterminate a pest. Kate made a sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob. Something between. She turned away from the screen, pressed her hands over her face. Sarah wrapped her good arm around her mother. They held each other while the room stayed silent around them. Dominic stood, walked to the window, stared out at Brooklyn waking up below. When he spoke, his voice carried weight Sarah had never heard before. Grief, rage, guilt. I sent him into danger. I promised protection. I failed. You didn't pull the trigger, Sarah said. I might as well have. Robert trusted me. He gathered this evidence because I asked him to, because I couldn't see that my own head of security was a snake. Your father paid for my blindness with his life. So what do we do now? Dominic turned. His face was different, harder, decided. Now we finish what Robert started. We destroy Marcus Trent, completely, no half measures, no mercy. Half. Before anyone could respond, Sarah's phone rang. The sound cut through the room like an alarm. Everyone froze. Sarah pulled the phone from her pocket. Unknown number. Again. Her stomach dropped. Don't answer it, Elias said. But Sarah was already pressing accept, putting it on speaker. Marcus Trent's voice filled the room, smooth, confident, mocking. Hello, Sarah. Did you enjoy the video? I've always thought it was my best work. The lighting was terrible, but the composition really captured the moment, don't you think? Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? To negotiate. You have evidence that will destroy me. I have something you value more. A trade seems appropriate. We're not giving you anything. Not even for your mother's life. Silence. Sarah looked at Kate. Kate looked back, confused. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded. Your mother takes medication. Oxycodone. How many pills did she take this morning, Sarah, before you dragged her out of the hospital? Did you count them? Did you check the bottle? Kate's face went white. She pulled the pill bottle from her pocket, stared at it like it was a snake. About 6 hours ago, Marcus continued, my people replaced her medication, switched her oxycodone with something more interesting. Strychnine mixed with slow-release polymer coating. Very advanced, very expensive. It takes about 8 hours to fully metabolize. Symptoms start gradually. Dizziness, nausea, then convulsions, respiratory failure, and finally, a very painful death. Kate started shaking. The pill bottle fell from her hands, scattered across the floor. You're lying, Sarah said, but she didn't believe it. Marcus had proven he'd do anything. Am I? How many pills did your mother take this morning? 2, 3? Check her pupils, Sarah. Are they dilated? Check her pulse. Is it racing? You have about 7 hours before the poison kills her. Unless you give me what I want. Sarah looked at her mother. Really looked. Kate's pupils were huge, black pools. Her hands trembled. A thin sheen of sweat covered her forehead. Mom, how do you feel? I'm fine. I'm just tired. Kate. Elias stepped closer. Checked her pulse with professional efficiency. His face went grim. Your heart rate is 140. That's not normal. Do you feel dizzy? A little. I thought it was just stress. Marcus's laughter came through the phone, cruel, delighted. Tick-tock, Sarah. 7 hours and counting. Bring me the USB drive and I'll give you the antidote. Your mother lives. You lose the evidence. Everyone wins, except your dead father. But he's been losing for 13 years, so what's one more defeat? If she dies, you die, Sarah said. I promise you that. Bold words from someone holding a dying woman. But threats are just noise without action. Here's what's going to happen. You'll meet me at the old Brooklyn warehouse, the one where your father died. Poetic, don't you think? You bring the drive, I bring the antidote. We make the exchange, and then we never see each other again. How do I know you'll actually have the antidote? You don't, but you don't have any other options. The hospital can't help. Standard treatments won't work. Only I have the specific compound that counteracts what I gave her. So you can waste time doubting me, or you can save your mother. Your choice. Clock's ticking. The call ended. Sarah stared at the dead phone, at her mother who was starting to sway on her feet, at Elias and Dominic and the USB drive on the computer desk that suddenly felt like a death sentence instead of salvation. We call an ambulance, Elias said. Get Kate to a hospital. They can pump her stomach, give her activated charcoal. It won't work, Alex said quietly. Everyone turned to him. The tech analyst looked uncomfortable being the center of attention, but continued. If it's really strychnine with polymer coating, it's already past her stomach. It's in her bloodstream, distributed throughout her system. Activated charcoal won't help. Stomach pumping won't help. He's right. We need the specific antidote. Kate's legs buckled. Sarah caught her, lowered her to a chair. Kate's breathing was coming faster, shallow. Her skin felt hot. We can't give him the drive, Dominic said. That evidence is the only leverage we have. My mother is dying. Sarah's voice was steel. I don't care about leverage. If Marcus gets that drive, he destroys it and walks free. Your father died for nothing. Jack Hart died for nothing. Everyone Marcus has killed stays unavenged. My father died protecting his family, and I'm going to honor that by protecting mine, even if it means Marcus wins. They stared at each other, Sarah exhausted and desperate, Dominic calculating and cold, two people on opposite sides of an impossible equation. There might be another way, Elias said. Everyone looked at him. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke to someone Sarah couldn't hear, nodded, hung up. That was Vincent Russo, Elias said, retired detective. He investigated your father's death 13 years ago, was forced to close it as accidental, but never believed it. He's been watching Marcus for over a decade, and he knows something we can use. What? Sarah demanded. Marcus keeps insurance files, evidence against everyone he's ever worked with. Dominic, other crime families, corrupt cops, judges, politicians. He's been building leverage for years, files that would destroy dozens of people if they became public. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Where does he keep these files? His mother's house in Queens. She died 3 years ago, but Marcus never sold it. Uses the basement as a private vault. If we can get those files, we have counter leverage. We threaten to expose Marcus's insurance policy unless he gives us the antidote. That's breaking and entering, Sarah said. Your father's murder was murder. Sometimes you break small laws to get justice for big crimes. Sarah looked at her mother. Kate was leaning forward now, head between her knees, trying to breathe through waves of nausea. 7 hours. Maybe less if Marcus lied about the timeline. Maybe Kate had 6 hours. 5, 4. How long to get to Queens? Sarah asked. 30 minutes. Then we go. Now. Kate lifted her head. Sarah, no, it's too dangerous. You watched Dad die because Marcus threatened me. I'm not watching you die because he threatened you. We're finishing this. Together. Kate tried to argue, but another wave of dizziness hit. She gripped the chair arms, closed her eyes. Elias was already moving, checking his gun, loading extra ammunition, preparing for violence. Dominic made a phone call, short, clipped. When he hung up, he said, Angela will meet you there. She's good in a fight. You'll need backup. You're not coming? Sarah asked. I'm too visible. If I'm seen breaking into someone's home, it raises questions. But I'll monitor from here. And if things go wrong, I'll send help. He paused. Sarah, I owe your father a debt I can never repay, but I can honor his memory by protecting his family. I give you my word. Whatever happens, Marcus Trent will not walk away from this. Sarah nodded, didn't trust herself to speak. Elias helped Kate stand. The woman from earlier appeared. Angela. She handed Sarah a jacket to hide her blood-stained shirt, gave Elias a bulletproof vest, checked her own weapon with practiced ease. They left through this back door, different car this time, SUV with dark windows. Angela drove, Elias in passenger seat, Sarah and Kate in back. They pulled onto empty Saturday morning streets and headed for Queens. The drive passed in tense silence. Sarah watched her mother, counted breaths, checked her pulse every few minutes. Kate's heart rate kept climbing, 145, 150. Her pupils stayed dilated, sweat soaked through her shirt. "How much time?" Kate whispered. Sarah checked her phone. 6 hours, maybe 5. "And if we can't get the antidote, we'll get it. But if we can't?" Sarah took her mother's hand. "Then I'll be with you. You won't be alone. I promise." Kate smiled, weak but real. "You're stronger than I ever was. I learned from the best. Dad taught me to fight. You taught me to survive. Together, that's enough." Queens appeared outside the windows. Residential streets, small houses with yards, normal lives happening behind normal walls. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knew their neighbors and crime was something that happened elsewhere. Perfect camouflage for a man like Marcus Trent. Angela parked 3 blocks from the Target house. They walked the rest of the way. Sarah supporting Kate, who was moving slower now, each step taking visible effort. Elias scouted ahead. Angela covered their backs. They reached the house at 3:47 a.m. It looked abandoned. Overgrown lawn, newspapers yellowing on the porch, windows dark, but security cameras covered every angle. Sophisticated system for a dead woman's house. "Vincent said the alarm code is his mother's birthday," Elias said. 0612. "How does he know that?" "He's been watching Marcus for 13 years. You watch someone long enough, you learn their patterns." They approached from the rear, basement window partially hidden by bushes. Elias removed the screen, disabled the alarm with Vincent's code. The system beeped twice and went silent. They were in. The basement smelled like dust and old concrete. Darkness pressed around them until Elias clicked on a flashlight. The beam cut through shadow, revealed a finished space, desk, filing cabinets, computer, safe built into the wall. This wasn't storage. This was an office. Sarah lowered Kate into the desk chair. Her mother's breathing was labored now, skin pale, lips tinged blue. Not enough oxygen getting through. They were running out of time. "Find the files," Sarah told Elias. "I'll watch her." Elias and Angela moved through the room, opening drawers, checking cabinets. Everything was locked. Everything needed keys they didn't have. Angela pulled out lockpicks, started working on the filing cabinets while Elias examined the computer. "It's password protected," Elias said. "Can you hack it?" Angela asked. "I'm not Alex. I don't have his skills." Elias stared at the login screen. "We need Vincent. He might know Marcus's passwords." Sarah looked at Kate. Her mother's head was tilted back, eyes closed, breathing too fast and too shallow. 4 hours left, maybe less. And then Sarah had an idea. Marcus knew about her father's death, talked about it, took pleasure in it. Maybe he was obsessed with it. Maybe his password was connected to it. "Try Robert Morgan," Sarah said. Elias typed. Hit enter. The screen flashed. Access denied. "Try the date, October 17th. Denied again. Sarah thought harder. What would Marcus use? What mattered to him? What represented his greatest victory? "Try warehouse fire," Elias typed. Hit enter. Enter. The computer unlocked. Files appeared on screen. Dozens of folders, each labeled with names Sarah recognized from news headlines. Politicians, judges, police captains, business leaders. Marcus had dirt on everyone. But more importantly, there was a folder labeled Castellano Insurance. Elias opened it. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Evidence of Dominic's crimes going back decades. Money laundering, extortion, bribery, murder. Everything Marcus had collected to protect himself if Dominic ever turned on him. And then Elias opened another folder. Morgan file. Sarah's breath caught. Inside were documents showing Robert Morgan wasn't just investigating Marcus for Dominic. He was also gathering evidence on Dominic for the FBI. Her father had been a federal informant, working both sides, trying to bring down the entire criminal organization. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. "Dad was FBI." Not officially, Angela said. She was reading over Elias's shoulder. Civilian informant. The FBI recruited him, but didn't protect him when things got dangerous. That's why Marcus killed him. Not just for betraying Marcus, for being a federal agent. The implications crashed over Sarah. Her father had died trying to do the impossible, trying to destroy both Dominic's empire and Marcus's coup, trying to clean up the corruption from the inside. He'd been a hero, a real hero. And he'd died alone in a warehouse fire while the FBI did nothing. Kate made a sound, choking, gagging. Sarah spun around. Her mother was convulsing, back arched, arms rigid, eyes rolled back. "Mom!" Elias was there in seconds, lowered Kate to the floor, turned her on her side. "She's seizing. The poison's accelerating. We need that antidote now." "Where is it?" Sarah shouted at the computer, at the files, at the empty room. Where would Marcus keep it? Angela ran upstairs, searched the kitchen, found nothing. Elias tried to access more files, but everything else was encrypted. Sarah held her mother's hand while Kate's body jerked and spasmed. Foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. Her pulse was erratic, weak. This was it. They'd failed. Come all this way, found the evidence. But they'd failed to save Kate. Sarah pressed her forehead against her mother's. Whispered words she hoped would reach through the seizures. "I love you, Mom. I love you so much. Dad loved you. We all loved you. You're not alone. You're not alone." And then light flooded the basement. Footsteps on the stairs. Multiple people. Sarah looked up, saw guns, saw men in dark clothes, saw Marcus Trent standing behind them with a smile that promised death. "Well," Marcus said, "isn't this touching? The whole Morgan family dying together. Almost poetic." Elias reached for his gun, but Marcus's men were faster. 3 pistols pointed at his head. He froze. Marcus walked down the stairs slowly, savoring the moment. "Breaking into my home, stealing my files. You've committed so many crimes tonight, Sarah. Your father would be so disappointed." "Where's the antidote?" Sarah's voice was raw, desperate. "In the refrigerator upstairs. Blue vial. But you won't be getting it. Because you're all about to have a very unfortunate accident. Gas leak maybe, carbon monoxide poisoning. So sad. The whole family gone." Kate's seizures intensified, her body arching off the floor. Sarah couldn't watch anymore, couldn't think, could only act. She grabbed the metal desk lamp, swung it at Marcus with all her strength. He dodged, barely. The lamp crashed into one of his men instead. Elias used the distraction, tackled another guard. Angela drew her weapon, fired twice. Both guards dropped. Chaos erupted in the small basement. Gunfire. Shouting. Sarah scrambled to her mother, dragged Kate behind the desk. Elias was fighting hand-to-hand with one of Marcus's men. Angela provided covering fire, and Marcus was backing toward the stairs. "Kill them!" Marcus screamed. "Kill them all!" But Sarah wasn't fighting anymore. She was running, up the stairs, past Marcus, who tried to grab her but missed, into the kitchen, to the refrigerator. She yanked it open, saw the blue vial on the top shelf, grabbed it, turned. Marcus stood in the doorway, gun pointed at her head. "Give me that. Give me one reason not to smash it on the floor." "Because then your mother dies in the next 10 minutes. She dies anyway if I give it to you." They stared at each other, Sarah holding the vial, Marcus holding the gun. Downstairs, the fighting continued. Someone screamed. A body hit the floor. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police. "You're going to lose," Sarah said. "Even if you kill me, even if you kill all of us. Vincent Russo has copies of everything. The recordings, the evidence, your confession. It's over, Marcus. Then we all go down together." He pulled the trigger. Sarah dove sideways. The bullet hit the refrigerator behind where she'd been standing. She hit the floor hard. The vial flew from her hand, rolled across the linoleum. Marcus lunged for it. Sarah was faster. She grabbed it, tucked it against her body, kicked Marcus's leg as hard as she could. He went down. The gun skittered away. Sarah ran, back to the basement, down the stairs. Angela had secured the remaining guards. Elias was on his phone calling for an ambulance. Kate was still seizing but less violently, fading, running out of time. Sarah dropped beside her mother, opened the vial, blue liquid inside. She didn't know the dosage, didn't know if this was even real or if Marcus had lied about everything. But she had to try. She poured half the vial into Kate's mouth, held her jaw closed, waited, counted heartbeats. 10, 20, 30. Kate's seizures began to slow. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes fluttered open. "Sarah?" "I'm here, Mom, I'm here." Police burst through the upstairs door, shouted commands. Elias identified himself as former NYPD, explained the situation. They found Marcus in the kitchen trying to escape through a window, hauled him back inside, cuffed him while he screamed about illegal searches and false accusations. Sarah held her mother while paramedics arrived, while they checked vitals and started an IV and loaded Kate onto a stretcher. The antidote had worked. Kate was going to live. They'd won, barely, but they'd won. As Marcus was being led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah. His face was different now. No smile, no mockery, just hatred, pure and complete. And "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied. "You're done, and my father's memory is finally clean." They took him away. Sarah rode in the ambulance with her mother, held her hand while the city passed outside the windows. Dawn was fully broken now. Saturday morning, the world continuing, people waking up to coffee and breakfast and normalcy. While Sarah sat beside her poisoned mother carrying a USB drive with evidence of murder and a heart full of grief and exhaustion and something that felt almost like victory. At the hospital, doctors confirmed the antidote had worked. Kate would need monitoring, but she'd survive. They admitted her for observation. Sarah sat in the chair beside the bed and finally let herself breathe. Elias appeared in this doorway hours later. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "Marcus is in custody. They found enough evidence in his basement to charge him with dozens of crimes. The DA wants to talk to you and Kate about testifying." "We'll testify," Sarah said. "Both of us, whatever it takes." Vincent copied all the files before the police arrived. "Dominic has everything. Marcus's insurance policy is useless now. He can't leverage anyone." Sarah nodded, too tired to feel triumph, too numb to feel anything except the need to sleep for about 100 years. "Your father would be proud," Elias said quietly. "You finished what he started." "We all did. You, Vincent, Angela, Mom, even Dominic in his way. Dad didn't do this alone, and neither did I." Elias smiled, started to leave, paused. "The USB drive, what do you want to do with it?" Sarah thought about her father, about Robert Morgan, who'd believed truth mattered more than safety, who'd documented everything because he knew someone would need it someday, who'd died protecting a future he'd never see. Give it to the FBI. All of it. Everything about Marcus, everything about Dominic, everything Dad gathered. Let it all come to light. That's what he would have wanted. Even if it means Dominic goes to prison? My father wasn't trying to save one criminal from another. He was trying to save everyone from all of them. We honor that. We finish it completely. Elias nodded. "I'll make sure it reaches the right people." He left. Sarah sat in the quiet hospital room, watching her mother sleep. Kate looked peaceful now. The poison purged from her system. The truth finally spoken. 13 years of silence broken. Sarah pulled out her phone, texted Mrs. Chen to bring Liam to the hospital when visiting hours started. He needed to see his mother, needed to know she was okay, needed to understand that sometimes fighting back was the only way to survive. Outside the hospital window, New York City moved through its Saturday. Millions of people living millions of lives. Most of them would never know what happened in a basement in Queens, would never know that a waitress and her mother and a few allies had faced down a murderer and won. But Sarah knew, Kate knew, and somewhere, she hoped her father knew too. The truth had won. Justice was coming. And the Morgan family, broken and scarred but still standing, would be there to see it through. 2 weeks passed like water through cupped hands. Fast and slow at the same time. Fast because every hour brought them closer to the trial. Slow because Kate spent those hours learning to be sober in a world that had terrified her into numbness for 13 years. The hospital kept her for 5 days. Observation, treatment, making sure the strychnine had fully cleared her system. Sarah visited every morning and evening, brought Liam after school. They sat together in the sterile room and slowly rebuilt something that resembled family. Liam didn't understand everything. He was 10, but he understood enough. He knew his mother had been poisoned, knew his sister had saved her, knew the man who killed their father was finally in jail. He held Kate's hand with a gentleness that broke Sarah's heart. Children shouldn't have to be this gentle with their parents. On day 6, Kate came home to their Brooklyn apartment, the place Marcus's men had ransacked. Sarah had cleaned it, put furniture back in place, replaced broken items, made it look normal even though nothing felt normal anymore. Kate stood in the doorway staring at the space where she'd spent 13 years hiding from the truth. "It looks different," Kate said. "I cleaned." "No, I mean it feels different, like I'm seeing it for the first time." Sarah understood. Sobriety changed everything, made the world sharper, clearer, more real. For someone who'd spent over a decade softening reality with pills, real must feel overwhelming. They settled into a new routine. Kate attended Narcotics Anonymous meetings every morning. Sarah went with her to the first 3. Sat in the circle of metal folding chairs in a church basement, and listened to people share stories of addiction and recovery. Stories that sounded like Kate's story. Like everyone's story when you stripped away the details. Pain, escape, rock bottom, choice, climbing back. On the 4th morning, Kate went alone. Came back 2 hours later with clear eyes and something like peace in her face. She'd shared her story, told strangers what she'd never told anyone, that she'd watched her husband die, that she'd drowned the memory in pills, that she'd abandoned her children emotionally because she couldn't face her own guilt. And the strangers had listened, understood, welcomed her. "They asked me to sponsor someone," Kate said over lunch, soup and sandwiches at the kitchen table. "A woman who's 3 weeks sober, struggling." "That's good, Mom." "Is it? I'm only 16 days sober myself. What do I know about recovery?" "You know about fighting, you know about surviving, that's enough." Kate smiled. The first real smile Sarah had seen in years. Not the pill-hazed vagueness, not the forced politeness. Real joy reaching her eyes. "Your father would be proud of you. You grew up so strong." "I had to. Someone needed to hold everything together. I'm sorry you had to be that person." "Don't be sorry, be here now. That's all that matters." They finished lunch, washed dishes together. A small ordinary moment that felt extraordinary because it was shared with presence instead of absence. Kate was actually there, actually seeing Sarah, actually participating in life instead of watching it from behind a chemical fog. That afternoon, the prosecutor arrived. Maria Santos, 42 years old with sharp eyes and sharper questions. She sat at their kitchen table with a leather briefcase and a recorder and asked Kate to tell her everything. Kate did, slowly at first, then faster as the words found their rhythm. She described the warehouse, the hiding place behind shipping crates, the argument, the gunshots, the gasoline, the fire, Marcus's execution shot. Every detail she'd carried for 13 years came pouring out in a confession that was also testimony. Maria listened, took notes, asked clarifying questions. When Kate finished, Maria set down her pen and looked at both women with something like respect. "Mrs. Morgan, your testimony is the strongest evidence we have. The video is powerful, the recordings are damning. But you're the only living witness to the actual murder. Without you, Marcus's lawyers will argue everything is circumstantial. With you, we have an eyewitness account. We can convict him." "When?" Kate asked. Her voice trembled. "Trial starts Monday, 3 days from now. Opening statements Monday morning. We'll present our case Tuesday and Wednesday. You'll testify Wednesday afternoon. 3 days." Sarah watched her mother's face go pale, watched fear creep back into eyes that had finally started to clear. "I don't know if I can do it," Kate whispered. "You have to," Maria said. Not unkind, just factual. Marcus Trent has expensive lawyers. They're already building a defense. They'll argue the video is grainy, the audio is taken out of context. They'll paint your husband as a criminal who got caught stealing and died in the firefight. Without your testimony, there's reasonable doubt. With it, we have certainty. What if I freeze? What if I can't speak when he's looking at me? Then you take a breath, look at your daughter, remember why you're doing this, and you speak anyway. Because brave isn't about not being afraid. Brave is about being terrified and doing it anyway. Maria left her card, promised to call with more details, walked out into the November afternoon, leaving Kate and Sarah sitting at the kitchen table in heavy silence. "I can't," Kate said finally. "I can't look at him. When I see Marcus, all I see is your father dying. I freeze. I disappear. I can't do it. Sarah took her mother's hands. You've done harder things. You survived 13 years carrying this secret. You got sober. You're here. You're present. You can do this. What if I fail? What if I mess up on the stand and he goes free? Then we'll have tried. And trying matters. Dad would want you to try. Kate pulled her hands away, stood, walked to the window overlooking the street. Your father never wanted any of this. He just wanted to protect us, provide for us, live a quiet life. But Dominic pulled him into this nightmare. And now I'm supposed to stand in court and relive the worst moment of my life? For what? Justice? Justice won't bring Robert back. No. But it might save the next family Marcus destroys. It might stop him from killing someone else's father, someone else's husband. That has to count for something. Kate turned. Her face was wet with tears. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher. Two, actually. Dad taught me that truth matters. You taught me that surviving matters. Together, that's enough to get through anything. The weekend passed in preparation. Sarah helped Kate organize her memories into coherent testimony. They wrote out a timeline, practiced answering questions Maria might ask, prepared for what the defense attorney would throw at her. Character attacks, accusations of being a drug addict with unreliable memory, suggestions that she'd made everything up for attention or money. On Sunday morning, Sarah drove Kate to Brooklyn, to the empty lot where the warehouse had been, demolished years ago. Now just cracked concrete and weeds pushing through asphalt. A chain-link fence surrounded the property. A faded sign warned of hazardous materials. No trespassing. They stood at the fence looking at nothing. This was where Robert Morgan died. This was where Kate's life shattered. This was where everything changed. The ground held no markers, no memorial, nothing to indicate a good man had been murdered here. Kate pressed her forehead against the chain link. I should have saved him. You couldn't. The fire was too intense. You would have died too. Maybe that would have been better. Maybe if I died with him, you and Liam wouldn't have had to grow up with a ghost for a mother. Stop. Don't do that. Don't rewrite history into something worse than it was. You did what you had to do. You protected yourself so you could protect us. That was the right choice. Kate turned, looked at Sarah with eyes that had seen too much. Tell me what to say. On the stand. When the defense lawyer calls me a liar and an addict and says I made everything up, what do I say? You tell the truth. You say yes, you're an addict. Yes, you take pills. But you became an addict because of what you witnessed. The pills help you forget, but you've never forgotten. You see Robert dying every night when you close your eyes. No amount of medication can erase that. And then you look at the jury, and you tell them exactly what Marcus Trent did. Kate nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. They stood together at the fence until the November cold drove them back to the car. On the drive home, Kate was quiet, processing, gathering strength. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. We're going to be okay, Mom. All of us. We're going to get through this. Kate squeezed back. I hope you're right. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. Sarah found him sitting at the kitchen table at 11 p.m., drawing pictures with colored pencils. She sat beside him, looked at what he was creating, a family, stick figures, one tall, two medium, one small, all holding hands. What are you drawing? Sarah asked. Us, after the trial, when everything is okay again. Sarah's throat tightened. That's beautiful, baby. Sarah, is Mommy going to be okay when she has to talk about Dad? She's going to be scared, but she's also going to be brave. How can you be both? Being brave means doing the scary thing anyway. It's not about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway because it matters. Liam thought about this, set down his pencil, looked at Sarah with those serious green eyes that were so much like their father's. Dad would want her to be brave, right? Yes, he would. Then she will be, because Mommy loved Dad. And when you love someone, you do hard things for them, even scary things. Sarah pulled her brother close, held him tight. When did you get so smart? I watch a lot of TV while I'm sick. People say wise stuff on TV. Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. The sound felt strange in her chest, like she'd forgotten how. Liam laughed too. They sat together at the kitchen table until Kate emerged from her bedroom and joined them. The three of them. A family. Broken but healing. Scared but together. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that promised winter. Sarah dressed in the one good outfit she owned. Black pants, white blouse, the same uniform she wore at the Sterling Hall, but without the vest. Professional, respectful. She helped Kate into a navy dress they'd bought at a thrift store. Simple, conservative, the kind of outfit that said trustworthy witness instead of drug addict. Liam stayed with Mrs. Chen. He wanted to come, wanted to see justice happen. But Sarah said no. Courtrooms were no place for 10-year-olds, especially when the testimony would describe his father's murder. Some things children shouldn't have to carry. The courthouse was downtown Manhattan, a massive stone building that represented the weight of law and justice and centuries of people seeking both. Sarah and Kate climbed the steps together, through metal detectors, down marble hallways, into the courtroom on the third floor, where Marcus Trent's trial would determine if truth mattered more than money. The room was bigger than Sarah expected. High ceilings, dark wood, rows of benches, a judge's bench raised above everything else. The jury box to the left, empty now, but soon to be filled with 12 strangers who would decide her father's legacy. Maria Santos waited at the prosecution table. She wore a gray suit that meant business, nodded at Kate and Sarah, gestured for them to sit in the front row behind the barrier separating spectators from participants. Kate sat, gripped Sarah's hand like a lifeline. The defense table sat empty. Then the door opened. Marcus Trent entered in handcuffs. Prison orange replaced his expensive suits. He looked smaller somehow, less powerful, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, cruel. He scanned the courtroom, found Kate, smiled. Kate made a small sound. Terror. Recognition. The smile that had threatened her 13 years ago. The smile that promised death if she ever spoke. Sarah squeezed her mother's hand harder. "Don't look at him, look at me, you're safe, I'm here." Kate tore her eyes away from Marcus, focused on Sarah, breathed. The bailiff removed Marcus's handcuffs. His lawyer appeared, Harold Green, 60 years old with silver hair and a reputation for getting guilty men acquitted. They sat together, leaned close, whispered strategy. The jury filed in, 12 people, mix of ages and faces and backgrounds. They settled into their box, looked around with curiosity and discomfort. None of them wanted to be here. All of them had been called to decide something impossibly heavy. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The Honorable Patricia Chen, 55. Sharp, fair. She'd been a prosecutor before becoming a judge, knew every trick defense lawyers used. She sat. Everyone sat. The trial began. Maria Santos stood for opening statements, walked to the jury box, made eye contact with each person. When she spoke, her voice carried authority and sorrow in equal measure. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about murder. Robert Morgan, loving father, dedicated husband, brave man, was executed 13 years ago by Marcus Trent. Why? Because Robert Morgan dared to expose corruption. Because he chose justice over fear. Because he believed truth mattered. Over the next 3 days, you'll hear testimony that will disturb you, video evidence that will haunt you. And you'll hear from Catherine Morgan, who watched her husband die and has lived with that trauma every day since. This is not a complicated case. Marcus Trent murdered Robert Morgan, and justice demands he pay for that crime." She sat. Harold Green stood, older, slower, but sharp as a knife when he smiled at the jury. "The prosecution will tell you a story, an emotional story about a murdered hero. But stories aren't evidence, and emotion isn't proof. Marcus Trent is a businessman. He's made enemies, people with grudges. And 13 years after an accidental warehouse fire, suddenly they're calling it murder? Why now? Because they need a scapegoat. The so-called evidence is tainted, obtained through illegal searches, coerced confessions, manipulated recordings. And the eyewitness? A drug addict with memory problems who's been in and out of rehabilitation for over a decade. By the end of this trial, you'll see the truth. Marcus Trent is innocent, and this prosecution is a witch hunt." He sat. The judge called the first witness. The trial was underway. Tuesday passed in a parade of experts and evidence. Elias testified about Marcus's confession at the restaurant, played the recording. The jury listened with focused attention. Green tried to discredit him, suggested he was biased because his father died the same night. Elias stayed calm, professional. His testimony stood. A forensic expert testified about the autopsy photos from 13 years ago. Showed gunshot wounds inconsistent with accidental fire death. 3 bullets, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. Execution style. Green argued the photos were degraded, inconclusive. The expert held firm. An FBI agent testified that Robert Morgan was a registered federal informant. Under FBI protection, that failed. Green suggested Robert was a criminal who got caught. The agent's jaw tightened, but she answered professionally, provided documents proving Robert's cooperation. And then Maria played the video, the warehouse security footage. The courtroom went silent as Robert Morgan appeared on screen, young, alive, moving toward his death. Sarah had seen it before, but watching it in court with strangers felt different, more real, more final. The jury watched Marcus pull the gun, watched Robert beg, watched the execution happen in grainy black and white. Several jurors looked away. One woman covered her mouth. When the flames filled the screen and the camera died, the silence in the courtroom was complete. Marcus sat stone-faced, showing nothing. His lawyer whispered in his ear. Marcus shook his head, refused whatever advice Green offered. The judge called recess. Sarah and Kate left the courtroom, stood in the hallway breathing air that didn't feel heavy with death. Kate was shaking. I can't watch that again. When I testify tomorrow, if they play it again, I can't. You won't have to watch. You'll be on the stand. You'll be telling them what you saw with your own eyes. That's different. Is it? Because I see it every night anyway. In my dreams, in my waking thoughts. It never stops playing. Maria joined them. You're doing great, Kate. Tomorrow is your day. Are you ready? No? Good. If you were ready, it would mean you didn't understand how important this is. Nerves mean you care. Use them. Let the jury see how much this cost you to speak about. They'll believe you. Wednesday arrived, the day Kate would testify. Sarah woke early, made coffee, sat with her mother while Kate picked at toast and tried not to throw up from anxiety. They rode to the courthouse in silence, climbed the stairs, entered the courtroom that now felt familiar. The morning session finished the prosecution's case. One more expert, one more recording, and then Maria stood. The prosecution calls Catherine Morgan. Kate froze. Sarah touched her shoulder. You can do this. I believe in you. Kate stood on legs that visibly shook, walked through the gate separating spectators from the court, approached the witness stand. The bailiff held out a Bible, asked if she swore to tell the truth. Kate's voice was barely audible. I do. She sat, looked out at the courtroom, found Sarah's face, held onto it like an anchor. Maria approached with gentle authority. Please state your name for the record. Catherine Ann Morgan. How did you know Robert Morgan? He was my husband. And where were you on October 17th, 13 years ago? Kate's hands gripped the armrests of the witness chair. At a warehouse in Brooklyn. Why were you there? To pick up my husband. He called me, asked me to meet him at midnight. What happened when you arrived? Kate's voice strengthened slightly. She'd practiced this, knew the questions, knew her answers. I arrived early, 11:50. I saw Marcus Trent's car already there. Robert told me if I ever saw Marcus's car, I should leave. But I didn't. I was worried. I went inside. What did you see inside the warehouse? I saw my husband. He was with Marcus and 2 other men. They were arguing. Could you hear what they were saying? Some of it. Marcus said Robert betrayed him. Said Robert was feeding information to Dominic while taking Marcus's money. Robert said he was doing what was right. What happened next? Kate's voice cracked. Marcus pulled a gun. Robert begged. He said, please don't do this. I have a wife, a daughter, a family. And Marcus said, then you shouldn't have been a rat. The courtroom was silent, 12 jurors leaning forward, Marcus staring at Kate with that same cruel smile. Kate stared back, and something changed in her face. Fear became anger. Weakness became strength. Marcus shot him, Kate continued, voice getting stronger. Twice. In the chest. Robert fell. He was still alive, still breathing. Marcus's men poured gasoline everywhere. Set it on fire. And then Marcus walked over to where my husband lay bleeding and dying, and he shot him again. In the head. To finish it. I watched my husband be executed. I watched him die. And I've lived with that memory every single day for 13 years. Maria let the words sit, let the jury absorb them, then asked quietly, "Why didn't you come forward immediately?" "Because the next day Marcus came to my apartment. He brought flowers, held me while I cried, and he whispered in my ear that it would be such a tragedy if something happened to my daughter, too. She was only 10 years old. He threatened her, so I stayed quiet to protect my child." "And what did you do to cope with what you witnessed?" Kate looked down at her hands. "I took pills, pain medication at first for an old injury, but then I took them to forget, to numb myself, to stop seeing my husband's murder every time I closed my eyes. I became an addict. I destroyed myself trying to survive what I'd seen." "Are you still taking pills?" "I've been sober for 19 days. What made you decide to testify now?" Kate looked at Sarah, then at the jury. "Because my daughter almost died standing up to Marcus. She got shot trying to speak the truth, and I realized that staying silent wasn't protecting anyone. It was just letting a murderer go free. My husband died for truth. The least I can do is tell it." Maria nodded. "No further questions." She sat. Harold Green stood, approached Kate with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah's stomach clenched. This was the dangerous part. The cross-examination where defense attorneys destroyed credibility and turned witnesses into liars. "Mrs. Morgan, you've been addicted to prescription opioids for 13 years, correct?"
Yes.
"And you expect this jury to trust the memory of a drug addict?" Kate met his eyes. "I became an addict because of what I witnessed that night. The pills helped me forget. But I've never forgotten my husband's murder. I see it every night when I close my eyes, every morning when I wake up. No amount of medication can erase watching someone you love be executed." Green's smile faltered. "But your memory could be faulty. Drugs affect perception." "I wasn't on drugs that night. I was completely sober. What I saw was real." "Why didn't you come forward immediately?" "Because Marcus Trent threatened my daughter. He said if I talked, she'd disappear, just like my husband. I chose my child's life over justice, wouldn't you?" The question hung in the air. Green had no good answer. He tried a different approach. "Isn't it true you're testifying now for money? That you'll profit from your husband's death?" "No, I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do." "But you've struggled financially for years. Wouldn't a conviction help you file a civil suit? Get a settlement?" Kate's voice turned to steel. "My husband is dead. No amount of money will bring him back. I'm not here for profit. I'm here for justice. So my husband's death means something. So Marcus Trent can't kill anyone else's father, anyone else's husband. If you can't understand that, then I pity you." Several jurors nodded. Green saw it, retreated. No further questions. Kate left the stand, walked back to Sarah, collapsed into her daughter's arms and sobbed. She'd done it, faced her fear, spoken truth, survived Marcus's lawyer's attacks. Sarah held her while the judge called for a brief recess. In the hallway, Maria found them. "You were incredible. The jury believes you. I could see it in their faces." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Closing arguments this afternoon, then jury deliberation. Could be hours, could be days. We wait." The afternoon passed in closing statements. Maria's was powerful, emotional. She reminded the jury of Robert's sacrifice, Kate's courage, the undeniable evidence. Harold Green's was technical, focused on reasonable doubt, questioned timing, suggested conspiracy. The jury left to deliberate. Sarah and Kate sat in the courtroom, waiting. 1 hour passed, 2, 3. Sarah counted ceiling tiles. Kate prayed quietly. Elias sat with them in support of silence. At hour 3, the bailiff emerged. "We have a verdict." Everyone filed back in. Jury took their seats. The forewoman stood, an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes. The judge asked the question that would determine everything. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the count of first-degree murder, how do you find?" The forewoman looked at Marcus, then at the judge. "We find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Kate sobbed. Sarah held her. Marcus stood stone-faced as the verdict was read. His lawyer argued for appeal. The judge denied. Set sentencing for 2 weeks. When they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah. His face held no remorse, no acceptance, just a promise. This isn't over. But Sarah didn't care, because for the first time in 13 years, justice had won. Truth had won. Her father's memory was clean. His sacrifice was honored. The man who killed him would spend the rest of his life in prison. 2 weeks later, they returned for sentencing. The judge looked at Marcus with barely concealed disgust. Marcus Trent, you have been found guilty of first-degree murder. This court sentences you to life in prison without possibility of parole. May you spend every remaining day contemplating the life you stole and the families you destroyed. Guards took him away. This time he didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, Sarah and Kate stood on the steps in December cold. Liam was with them now. Mrs. Chen had brought him to hear the sentencing. He held his mother's hand and his sister's hand and looked up at the building where justice had finally been served. Is it over? Liam asked. Sarah looked at Kate. Kate looked back. They both knew the answer. Marcus was in prison, but Dominic was still free. The FBI still had the USB drive. There were more battles to fight, more truths to tell. But for now, in this moment, they'd won. It's over, Sarah said. We're safe now. And for the first time in 13 years, she almost believed it. 3 months after the verdict, Sarah Morgan stood in the kitchen of the Sterling Hall preparing for dinner service. 3 months since Marcus Trent disappeared into a prison cell for the rest of his life. 3 months since Kate started rebuilding herself one sober day at a time. 3 months since everything should have felt safe. But it didn't. Sarah noticed the car first. Black sedan parked across the street from her apartment. Different driver every few days, but always the same make and model. Always watching. She mentioned it to Kate, who said maybe she was being paranoid. But paranoia kept people alive when monsters pretended to be benefactors. The phone calls came next. Clicks on the line when she talked to Elias or Vincent. Subtle. Easy to dismiss as bad connection. Except Sarah had worked in restaurants long enough to recognize surveillance when it touched her life. Someone was listening. Someone wanted her to know they were listening. And then Gregory, the front-of-house manager at Sterling Hall, announced Sarah's promotion. Floor manager, significant raise, more responsibility, more visibility, more access to the restaurant's operations. The announcement came with a handwritten note from Dominic Castellano. You've earned this. Your father would be proud. Sarah stared at the note for a long time. Dominic was in custody, awaiting trial for his own crimes now that the FBI had Robert's evidence. But he still owned the Sterling Hall through shell corporations, still had reach, still had power, and now he was promoting the daughter of the man who died gathering evidence against him. Nothing about that felt like coincidence. That evening, Sarah met Elias at a coffee shop in Chelsea. Neutral territory. Somewhere they could talk without being overheard. Elias looked tired. He'd been working with the FBI for months now, preparing for Dominic's trial, building the case against everyone Robert's evidence implicated. You need to quit that job, Elias said without preamble. I need the money. Liam's medical bills haven't stopped. Dominic is watching you. The promotion, the note, he's testing your loyalty. I don't owe him loyalty. Marcus is in prison. We won. We won one battle. But Dominic Castellano has been building his empire for 40 years. He doesn't go down easy. And you have evidence about his organization. You testified about Marcus. You're a loose end. Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The warmth helped against the November cold that had settled into her bones. What do you think he wants? Control. He wants you close so he can monitor what you know, who you talk to, what you might tell prosecutors. The promotion isn't a reward, it's a leash. So what do I do? Just walk away from the only job I have? Yes, before he decides you're more dangerous free than controlled. Sarah thought about her father, about Robert Morgan, who'd walked into danger because Dominic asked him to, who'd gathered evidence and died for his trouble. Dominic had promised protection and delivered death, and now he was making promises to Robert's daughter. I'll think about it, Sarah said. 2 days later, Dominic requested a meeting. Not demanded. Requested, polite, civilized. Terrifying in its gentleness. Sarah agreed because refusing felt more dangerous than accepting. They met at the Sterling Hall after hours. The restaurant empty and dark except for a single table near the window. Dominic sat in the same spot where Marcus had sat the night everything changed, where he'd confessed to murder and changed Sarah's life forever. Dominic gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit. Sit. Sarah sat, kept her back straight, her face neutral, the invisible waitress who'd learned to hide everything behind professional courtesy. Dominic poured wine into 2 glasses. Expensive vintage, the kind that cost more than Sarah made in a week. He pushed 1 glass toward her. To your father, Robert Morgan, a brave man who deserved better than what this world gave him. Sarah didn't touch the glass. Don't talk about my father. Why not? I respected him. He was honorable, decent, everything I'm not. He died because you sent him to investigate a man you should have handled yourself. Dominic's smile was sad, genuine. You're right, I used him. Sent him into danger I should have faced. And I've carried that guilt every day since. But guilt doesn't change the past. It only shapes what we do next. What do you want, Dominic? He leaned back, studied her with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. I'm offering you a future. Manager of operations for all my restaurants. 6-figure salary, benefits, security for your family. All you have to do is forget what you learned during Marcus's trial. Forget that my father was your informant, that you blackmailed him into investigating Marcus? Dominic's eyes narrowed. Who told you that? Does it matter? It's true. Your father made choices. I provided opportunities. He chose to become involved. He chose to protect his family because you threatened us. Silence stretched between them. Outside the window, Manhattan moved through its evening. People heading home, heading to dinner, living lives untouched by the violence happening in elegant restaurants where power ate while others served. Sarah, Dominic's voice hardened, you have 2 options, work for me or against me. There is no third option. You know too much about my operations. You testified in federal court. Every prosecutor in New York wants you as their star witness against me. I can't let you become that person. So what, you'll kill me? Like you did my father? I didn't kill Robert. But I won't make the same mistake twice. I won't trust someone who has the power to destroy me. Sarah stood. I choose option 3. I walk away. You leave my family alone, and we pretend none of this ever happened. Dominic stood as well. Taller, broader, more dangerous. That's not how this works. You're either with me or you're a problem, and I eliminate problems. Sarah met his eyes, saw the threat, understood it completely. Then I guess I'm a problem. She walked out, left Dominic standing in his restaurant among empty tables and crystal chandeliers, left the job that had kept her family afloat for 3 years, left behind the invisible safety of being someone nobody noticed. Kate was waiting when Sarah got home, sitting at the kitchen table with tea and worry lines carved deep around her eyes. 4 months sober now, clearer every day, more present, more herself. You quit, Kate said. Not a question. She'd learned to read Sarah the way Sarah had learned to read restaurant guests. I quit. Because of Dominic. He gave me an ultimatum. Work for him or become his enemy. I chose neither. Kate set down her tea. He'll come after maybe. Probably. But I won't work for the man who got Dad killed. Won't help him launder money or hide crimes or any of it. Dad died trying to stop people like Dominic. I can't betray that. So what do we do? Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Elias. She answered on speaker. Sarah, don't go home tonight. Dominic has people watching your building. I think he's going to make a move. We're already home. Then pack a bag. Now. I'm sending Vincent to get you. You're going to a safe house. For how long? Until we figure out how to neutralize Dominic without getting you killed. They packed quickly. Essentials only. Liam confused but cooperative. Mrs. Chen promised to water the plants and hold their mail. Vincent arrived in an unmarked car, drove them to a motel in New Jersey. Nothing fancy, just clean and anonymous and far enough from Manhattan that Dominic's reach didn't extend. The room had 2 double beds and a view of the parking lot. Liam claimed the bed near the window. Kate sat on the other bed looking lost. Sarah paced, thinking, planning, trying to see a way through this that didn't end with more violence. We can't live like this, Kate said quietly. Running, hiding, waiting for Dominic to decide our fate. What's the alternative? Kate looked up. Her eyes held something Sarah hadn't seen before. Determination, clarity. The woman Kate had been before pills and trauma had hollowed her out. We fight back, but not the way Marcus fought, not with violence. We're smarter than that. How do you fight a man who owns half of Manhattan? You make him not own it anymore. His power comes from his restaurants. They're fronts for money laundering. If the restaurants fail, his operation collapses. We don't need to kill him or arrest him. We just need to make him irrelevant. Sarah stared at her mother. How do we shut down the most successful restaurants in New York? Kate smiled. The first time Sarah had seen that particular smile. The smile of someone who'd found a weapon and knew exactly how to use it. We make them unsuccessful. You worked at Sterling Hall for 3 years. You know every health code violation Dominic bribed inspectors to ignore, every fire safety issue, every worker complaint, document everything, report everything, bury him in legitimate regulatory problems. Elias arrived an hour later. They explained Kate's plan. He listened with the focused attention of someone trained to evaluate strategy. When they finished, he pulled out his phone. I'll call Vincent. He has contacts at the health department, fire marshal's office, OSHA. If we coordinate properly, we can hit all of Dominic's restaurants simultaneously. Is this legal? Sarah asked. Reporting actual violations? Completely legal. Dominic's been breaking laws for years. We're just making sure those laws get enforced. They worked through the night. Sarah wrote detailed reports of every violation she'd witnessed at the Sterling Hall. Expired refrigeration units, pest control failures, fire exits blocked by storage, staff working unpaid overtime, unsafe working conditions. 3 years of observations compiled into documentation that would bury Dominic's operation in regulatory hell. Vincent distributed the reports to his contacts, made calls, pulled favors accumulated over decades of police work. By morning, inspectors were scheduling emergency visits to all 4 of Dominic's restaurants. The health department arrived at the Sterling Hall at 10 a.m. on a Friday, peak prep time, chaos already brewing in the kitchen. The inspectors found 17 violations, shut the restaurant down pending corrections. The news hit social media within an hour. Fire marshal inspected Dominic's second restaurant, found blocked exits, outdated suppression systems, 12 violations, closed immediately. OSHA visited the third location, discovered workers without proper safety equipment, unpaid overtime, hostile work environment, 15 violations, hefty fines, mandatory corrections. The fourth restaurant got hit by a combination of health department and fire marshal, 20 violations total, closed indefinitely. Food critics picked up the story, wrote scathing articles about how Manhattan's elite restaurants were actually dangerous workplaces with unsafe conditions. Investors started asking questions. Reservations were canceled. Dominic's carefully constructed empire began crumbling. Sarah's phone rang at noon. Dominic. She let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. Finally, she answered. You're destroying my life's work. His voice was cold fury. You destroyed my father's life. Consider this payback. I offered you partnership. You chose war. No, I chose freedom. You can't threaten me if you have nothing to threaten me with. Your restaurants are closed. Your money is frozen. Your power is gone. You're just a man now, and men can be held accountable. She hung up, felt something like satisfaction warm her chest. Not revenge, not exactly. Just justice served in a way that didn't require violence, didn't require becoming what Dominic was, just required knowing the system and using it the way it was meant to be used. Elias called that evening. The FBI is executing warrants tomorrow. Dominic's home, his office, the restaurants. They're moving on the evidence from your father's USB drive combined with what you documented. He's done. How did you coordinate this? I've been working with the federal prosecutor since Marcus's trial. Showed them everything. Robert's original evidence, Vincent's surveillance files, your new documentation. They've been building a RICO case for months. Your sabotage just accelerated their timeline. The next morning, FBI agents raided all 4 restaurants simultaneously. Dominic's penthouse, his warehouse, every property connected to his organization. Sarah watched the news coverage from the motel room, saw agents carrying boxes of evidence, saw Dominic let out in handcuffs. As they walked him to the FBI vehicle, Dominic looked directly at the news camera. His face was stone, unreadable, but his eyes found the lens, found whoever might be watching, found Sarah. She heard his voice clearly even though the news had no audio, saw his lips form the words, "Your father was a rat." Sarah turned off the television, didn't need to hear more, didn't need Dominic's judgment or anger or threats. He was in custody. His empire was rubble, and Robert Morgan's daughter had helped make it happen without firing a single shot. 1 year passed. Sarah stood in front of Manhattan Community College looking at the course catalog. Criminal Justice Program. classes on law enforcement, legal systems, victim advocacy. She'd use the settlement money from the wrongful death lawsuit against Dominic's organization to pay tuition. First semester starting in January. She wasn't going back to restaurants, wasn't going back to being invisible. The FBI had offered her a consulting position, part-time, helping them understand how criminal organizations used hospitality industry as fronts, teaching agents what to look for, how servers and kitchen staff saw things management tried to hide. It paid enough to cover Liam's medical bills, left time for school, let her use everything she'd learned as the invisible waitress to help protect other families from men like Marcus and Dominic. Kate found her calling too. The rehabilitation center where she attended meetings offered her a job. Peer counselor, helping other women navigate early sobriety, sharing her story, proving that 13 years of addiction didn't have to define the rest of a life, that facing trauma was possible, that healing was real. Sarah watched her mother lead group sessions with authority and compassion, watched her help women who looked the way Kate had looked a year ago, lost, scared, drowning. Kate threw them ropes made of honesty and hope, pulled them toward shore one truth at a time. On Kate's one-year sobriety anniversary, she spoke at a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. Sarah and Liam sat in the back row, listened to Kate tell her story to a room full of strangers who understood. "My name is Catherine. I'm an addict. I've been sober for 1 year." Applause. Genuine, supportive. A room full of people who knew how hard 1 year was. "For 13 years I used pills to forget watching my husband die. I abandoned my children emotionally because I couldn't face my own pain. But my daughter taught me something. She taught me that running from pain doesn't make it disappear. Facing it does. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up in court, look your husband's killer in the eye, and tell the truth." Kate's voice was steady, strong, the voice of someone who'd walked through fire and survived. "I'm not proud of my years as an addict, but I'm proud of my sobriety, and I'm proud of my family. They never gave up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. So if you're sitting here thinking you can't do this, thinking one day is impossible, let me tell you something. You can. 1 hour at a time, one choice at a time, one truth at a time. You can." The room applauded again. Sarah felt tears on her face, didn't wipe them away. Let herself feel the pride, the joy, the overwhelming relief that her mother was still here, still fighting, still alive. Liam was thriving too, 11 years old now. The new treatment protocol was working better than anything before. He'd gained weight, had energy, played with other kids without exhausting himself. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, talked about remission, about normal childhood, about futures that extended beyond hospital rooms. He'd started drawing seriously, created a graphic novel called The Invisible Hero, a story about a waitress who fought criminals with intelligence instead of weapons, who saved her family through courage and truth. The main character looks suspiciously like Sarah. The villain looks suspiciously like Marcus Trent. "Can I show this to my class?" Liam asked one evening at dinner. "Of course, baby. Why wouldn't you?" "Because it's about our family, about what really happened. Is that okay?" Sarah reached across the table, took his hand. "Our story is nothing to be ashamed of. Dad died fighting for what was right. Mom survived impossible trauma. We made it through. That's not shameful. That's powerful. Share it." Liam smiled, that gap-toothed smile that reminded Sarah so much of their father. "Dad would like this story, wouldn't he? He would love it, because it's true, and truth always mattered to him." Elias remained in Sarah's life, but not the way romantic stories usually ended. They were friends, close friends, bonded by shared loss and shared victory. But romance felt complicated, premature. They both carried too much grief to build something new on that foundation. Maybe someday, maybe never. For now, friendship was enough. He'd started the Robert Morgan Scholarship Fund, money donated by people who'd heard about the case, who admired what Robert had done, who wanted to help children of crime victims get education their parents couldn't afford. Sarah was the first recipient, full scholarship to Manhattan Community College, then to John Jay College of Criminal Justice if she wanted to continue. "Your father would be proud," Elias told her when presenting the award. "You're finishing what he started." Vincent Russo finally truly retired, sold his apartment in Queens, moved upstate to a small house near a lake. Before leaving, He visited Sarah one last time, brought a gift wrapped in brown paper. "This belonged to your father," Vincent said. "I kept it after the investigation closed. Always meant to return it. Now feels like the right time." Sarah unwrapped the package. Inside was a notebook, leather-bound, worn from years of use. She opened it carefully. Her father's handwriting filled the pages. Notes from his investigation, observations, sketches, details about Marcus's operation, evidence gathering, everything Robert had documented before his death. Sarah flipped through pages, saw her father's mind at work, his careful analysis, his moral clarity, his determination to do what was right no matter the cost. And then on the last page, dated the day before he died, a message. "If you're reading this, Sarah, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. I wanted to give you a better life. But sometimes doing the right thing means risking everything. Never stop fighting for what's right. Never let fear silence you. And always remember, I love you, Dad." Sarah pressed the notebook to her chest, felt tears come. "Let them." Vincent sat quietly until she was ready to speak. "He knew," Sarah whispered. "He knew Marcus might kill him. He went anyway." "Your father believed some things were worth dying for. Truth, justice, family. He wasn't wrong. Was it worth it? He died. We struggled for 13 years. Marcus is in prison. Pero Dominic might have gone free if I hadn't pushed. Was Dad's death worth it?" Vincent considered the question carefully. "Your father's death wasn't worth anything. It was a tragedy, a crime, a loss that damaged everyone who loved him. But what you did with that loss, how you honored his memory, that has worth. You turned pain into purpose, grief into justice. That's what makes his sacrifice meaningful." He stood to leave, paused at the door. "Robert would be proud of who you became, not because you avenged him, but because you survived him, because you took the broken pieces he left behind and built something good." The trials concluded over the following months. Marcus Trent lost his appeal, remained in solitary confinement after being attacked by other inmates. Too many enemies, too much hatred. He'd spend whatever years remained completely alone. Dominic Castellano took a plea deal, 25 years in federal prison, agreed to testify against other crime families in exchange for avoiding life without parole. His cooperation brought down 17 other criminals, destroyed 3 major organizations, cleaned up corruption that had festered for decades. Some people called Dominic a hero for cooperating. Sarah called him a criminal who made one good choice at the end of a lifetime of bad ones. He was still responsible for her father's death, still guilty of using Robert as a pawn. The testimony didn't erase that. The city of New York passed legislation in Robert's name, the Robert Morgan Act, mandatory reporting of organized crime connections in the hospitality industry, training for restaurant workers on recognizing money laundering, protection for whistleblowers, systems designed to prevent what happened to Robert from happening to anyone else. On a cold Saturday in December, 1 year after the verdicts, the city dedicated a memorial garden on the site where the warehouse had stood. The lot had been purchased by a community organization, transformed from concrete and weeds into green space, trees, viewers, benches, a place for neighborhood families to gather. At the center stood a bronze plaque, simple, dignified, with words chosen by Sarah and Kate. "Robert Morgan Memorial Garden, in memory of all who sacrificed for justice. The truth matters." The dedication ceremony drew a crowd. Mayor spoke. Community leaders spoke. And then Sarah stepped to the microphone, looked out at faces she knew and faces she didn't. People whose lives had been touched by organized crime, families who'd lost fathers, mothers, children, all of them gathered to honor memory and hope. "My father died when I was 10 years old," Sarah began. "For 13 years I believed it was an accident. When I learned the truth, that he was murdered, I felt anger, grief, rage. I wanted revenge. But revenge isn't the same as justice. Justice means standing up in court, speaking truth, holding powerful people accountable. Justice means creating change so other families don't suffer like mine did." The crowd listened with focused attention. Sarah continued, "My father's death wasn't meaningless. It sparked something, a fight for truth that my mother, my brother, and I have continued. And we'll keep fighting, because that's what family does. We fight for each other. We honor those who came before. We build futures worthy of their sacrifice. Applause rippled through the gathering. Kate stood beside Sarah, Liam between them, Elias nearby, Vincent watching from the back. A community of survivors bearing witness to the fact that justice, however delayed, was still justice. Sarah planted the memorial tree, an oak, symbol of strength and endurance. She poured dirt around the roots while Kate held Liam's hand. When the tree was secure, Sarah knelt beside it, pressed her palm against rough bark, whispered words meant only for her father. "This is for you, Dad. We finished what you started. Marcus is in prison, Dominic is in prison. The city passed laws in your name. You didn't die for nothing. Your sacrifice mattered. We made it matter." Wind rustled through bare branches. Winter sun broke through clouds. Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Not closure exactly. Loss doesn't close. But acceptance, understanding, peace with the fact that her father's death, while tragic, had become the catalyst for change that saved other families from the same fate. She stood, rejoined her family. They walked together through the garden, past families playing, children laughing, life continuing in a space that once held only death and fire and grief. Transformation made possible by refusing to let darkness have the final word. That evening, Sarah sat at the kitchen table in their Brooklyn apartment, the same table where she'd counted bills and worried about money and felt the weight of responsibility crush her. But tonight the bills were paid. Liam was healthy. Kate was sober. And Sarah had a future that extended beyond survival. She opened her father's notebook, reread his final message, and then she picked up a pen, started writing her own entry on the next blank page. "Dad, it's been 1 year since we brought your killers to justice. 1 year since we proved truth matters more than power. I'm in college now, studying criminal justice, working with the FBI, helping prevent what happened to you from happening to others. Mom is sober and strong. Liam is healthy and happy. We're okay. We made it through. And every day I try to live in a way that honors your memory. Not by seeking revenge, not by letting anger consume me, but by fighting for truth the way you did. By believing that justice, however imperfect, is worth pursuing. I love you. I miss you. And I promise to keep making you proud. Your daughter, Sarah." She closed the notebook, set down the pen. Outside the window, Brooklyn moved through its Saturday night. Millions of people living millions of lives. Most would never know about the waitress who'd faced down murderers and won, would never know about the mother who'd overcome addiction to testify, would never know about the little boy who'd survived illness while his family fell apart and came back together. But Sarah knew, Kate knew, Liam knew, and that was enough. The invisible had become visible. The silent had found voice. The powerless had discovered power. And a family that should have been destroyed by violence had instead been forged into something stronger than the forces that tried to break them. Sarah turned off the kitchen light, walked to her bedroom, lay down in the darkness, and felt something she hadn't felt in 13 years. Hope, real hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from denial, but the earned kind that comes from surviving the worst and discovering you're still standing. She thought about her father one last time before sleep claimed her. Imagined him watching from whatever place good men go when they die fighting for what matters. Imagined him proud. Imagined him at peace. Imagined him knowing that his daughter had inherited his stubborn refusal to stay quiet, his belief that truth matters more than safety, his willingness to fight even when fighting seemed impossible. People think service workers are invisible. Waitresses and cleaners and cooks. We blend into the background, pour wine and clear plates and disappear between courses. But invisible doesn't mean powerless. Sometimes the people no one notices are the ones who see everything, who hear everything, who remember everything. And when the moment comes, we're ready. My father was a server. He poured drinks and delivered meals and listened. And what he heard changed everything. I'm a server too, was a server, and I learned from the best. Never underestimate the invisible. We're watching, we're listening, and when truth needs defending, we step into the light. Sarah closed her eyes, let sleep come, dreamed of oak trees growing strong, of gardens blooming where warehouses burned, of futures built on foundations of truth instead of silence, of families healing, of justice served, of invisible people becoming undeniable. Tomorrow she'd wake to coffee and classes, and the ordinary miracle of a life rebuilt from ashes. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of her Brooklyn bedroom, Sarah Morgan rested, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who'd looked evil in the face and refused to blink, who'd honored her father's memory by finishing his mission, who'd proven that truth, however dangerous to speak, was always worth the risk. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And sometimes, when the weight of that arc needs help bending, it takes an invisible waitress and her broken family to push, to fight, to refuse to let darkness win. They'd pushed, they'd fought, and in the end, against every odd, against every expectation, they'd won. The invisible witness had spoken, and the world had listened.